I'm not the kind of guy who asks for much. Give me some peace, a fridge that works, and enough cash to keep the lights on, and I am good. My name's Charlie. I'm 22, just finished my 3rd year of college, and I'm trying to scrape together enough for the last push. Final semester coming up, and I still owe for textbooks and rent. I study environmental science, not because I think I'm going to save the world or anything, but because I like being outside, and I don't want a job that chains me to a desk. I grew up in a town called Eldridge, one of those places with a diner that only plays 80s rock and a hardware store that smells like sawdust and old socks. People there know your name, your dad's name, and which football game you missed. It's boring in a way that is kind of comforting, but it's not the kind of place where you find good work unless your uncle owns something or you're good with cars. I'm not. I get oil on my hands and suddenly I'm wiping them on my jeans and then I've ruined my jeans. That is me. This summer, I didn't want anything complicated. No internship with 15 unpaid hours and a resume full of fake smiles. I just wanted something easy, something I could clock in and out of and not think about when I left. My buddy Trevor said working night shifts somewhere quiet is the best way to keep your brain intact. He worked security once at a boat dealership. Said the first 3 nights were weird. Then it was mostly microwave burritos and watching old kung fu movies on his laptop. So that's what I was looking for. Simple, quiet, cash. I saw the ad in the local paper on a Sunday. It was wedged between a coupon for dog grooming and some woman selling rabbit cages. Night shift. Fuel station attendant. No experience necessary. Start immediately. Good pay. No company name, no logo, nothing but a number printed at the bottom. That's all. I liked that it didn't ask for a resume. I'm not great at writing those. I've worked for a couple restaurants, did landscaping for one weird summer, and sold popcorn at a movie theater where the air conditioner never worked. But anyway, I called the number that same day, maybe 10 minutes after seeing it. A guy picked up on the second ring. His name was Mason. No last name. I started saying, "Hi, calling about the night shift job." And before I could ask anything else, he just said, "You're hired." That was it. I waited, thinking maybe he was joking, but he just gave me directions to the gas station and said, "Your shift starts at midnight tomorrow, don't be late." Then he hung up. Didn't ask for my name. Didn't ask for a single thing, actually. I figured it was some kind of desperate place, probably out in the boonies. Maybe lost their last employee to something like boredom or a better paycheck. Either way, I was in. I needed the money. And I like staying up late. And honestly, it felt like something I could handle. The gas station was at the end of a dirt road miles out of town. Mason had said it was off Road 7, near an old sign for a fishing lodge that apparently burned down in the 90s. I had to Google the spot twice and still didn't see anything on the map. Just a line of road that turned into nothing. But I figured maybe it was one of those places that hadn't been updated online. There's a lot of those around here. I left the house at 11:15 p.m. I had a backpack with me, water bottle, 2 packs of gum, a notebook, and an old magazine I found under my bed. I didn't bother bringing food. I figured a gas station would have snacks. The roads were mostly empty, not unusual for this late. Once I turned off the main road, it got darker fast. Real fast. There were streetlights here and there, but more than one was busted. I remember that clearly. One pole was leaning sideways, like someone had backed into it with a truck and no one had bothered to fix it. The dirt road came up suddenly. No sign. Just a narrow turnoff with 2 bent mailboxes and weeds growing around them. I slowed down and turned in, my tires crunching over the gravel. It was a long drive in, trees on both sides, tall and packed close. I couldn't see anything past him. I kept thinking if I missed the place, there's nowhere to turn around. But eventually, after what felt like, 10 or 15 minutes, the road opened up, and I saw the gas station. It was small, low roof, old siding, one flickering light above the sliding doors. A sign on top of the building said gas in faded red letters. No company name, no logo, just gas. One pump out front. A dusty truck parked on the side, but it looked like it hadn't moved in years. There was not a soul anywhere. I parked my car and sat there for a moment. No movement. No sound, except for bugs chirping in the trees behind me. I got out, walked up to the doors. They were chained shut. Thick, rusted chains wrapped around the handles, locked tight. I checked my phone. No new messages, no signal either. That part bugged me a little. And then I remembered Mason had said keys in the potted plant. And sure enough, there was a big plastic pot next to the door. It had one of those plastic plants in it, dusty and faded. I reached under the rim and felt something cold. A key. Plain. Metal. A little dirty. I used it on the padlock. It clicked open easier than I expected. The doors slid apart with a bit of effort. They stuck a little, but I got them open. And inside, it looked normal. Sunglasses on a spinner rack up front. A whole wall of energy drinks in the back. Gummy bears on the counter. It looked like any other gas station at first, until I noticed the giant list of rules. Behind the register, taped to the counter with yellowing edges, was a single sheet of paper, typed out, not handwritten. The first line stood out in bold. Rule 1. Feed the cat. Underneath that, it read, his name is Ripley, and he's an orange tabby missing an eye. Sometimes you'll find him sitting on the counter as if he were waiting for you to arrive. Other times, he'll be facing the entrance to the back rooms. We don't really know why he goes there, and it's best not to ask. There's a box of yellow sardines from some place called the Watermelon Company under the cash register. Use it to fill his red bowl you'll find near the entrance. Ripley is a good cat. Always keep him fed. Okay. I stared at that for a moment, then looked up. A cat had jumped out of the counter while I'd been reading. Orange fur. One eye. The left one was missing, like it'd been plucked out long ago. His good eye was green, a little squinty, and not too interested in me. He was just sitting there, like the note said, calm and waiting. Hi? I said softly. He blinked back real slow. I leaned over and opened the cabinet under the register. There was a box inside, pale yellow with blue lettering. Watermelon Company, sardines in oil in faded print. The back of the box had something written in another language. I didn't recognize the letters. Wasn't Spanish, wasn't French, wasn't anything I'd ever seen. I opened the box. Inside were little round tins, all the same. I peeled one open, and the smell hit me. Strong, oily, salty. The kind of smell that sticks to your fingers even after washing. Ripley perked up when I opened the tin. I found the red bowl near the front entrance, just like the note said. It had a few old flakes of dried fish in it, but nothing fresh. I dumped the sardines in, oil and all, and set it down gently. Ripley jumped off the counter and trotted over, quiet as a whisper. He sniffed the bowl, then started eating, slow and steady, no rush. I watched him for a second. one eye focused, tail flicking slowly. He looked like a pirate, a small, lazy, hungry pirate. "That's a good cat," I said, and gave him a gentle scratch behind the ears. He leaned into it just a little. After that, I walked back to the register and put a little check mark next to the first rule with a pen somebody left beside the paper. All right, rule number 1, feed the cat. Check. The next line on the paper was bold again. Rule 2, check the locks. Under that, it said, "It's all the way in the back past the freezer section in the old chip aisle. Looks like a normal door, except it's red. There's red chains surrounding it. Make sure they haven't budged. Ignore the screaming." Okay, well, that sounded more like security work, which was fine. Maybe the place had break-ins or kids trying to sneak in through the back. I looked around and spotted the aisles. Nothing fancy. One shelf had a half-stocked row of dusty chips. Most of them were off-brand. Things like Salty Crunch and Zesty Corn Explosion. The bags were old and kind of sun-bleached, like they'd been sitting for a long time. The freezers were humming low. Half of them were empty. One had a few popsicles in the corner. Another had what looked like frozen burritos from another decade. I passed them and turned into the far back aisle. The air back here felt still, like this part of the building didn't get cleaned often. And then I saw it. The door wasn't hard to find. It was bright red. Not painted over, but a solid metal red. Like, I don't know, fire truck paint. Heavy, thick, and wrapped in chains. Big red chains, thick as my hand. Not just wrapped around the door handle, but across the whole door in a tight X shape. The links looked solid. Some had little dents in them, like they'd been hid or scraped at one point. The padlock, it was huge. Old-fashioned, like something off a giant barn. There were scratches on the wall near the handle. I figured that part right away. Long, deep ones, like someone had dragged a tool or their nails down the drywall, like they'd tried to get the door open, or maybe tried to stop it from closing. I leaned forward, didn't touch anything yet, just looked. Didn't feel like a backroom door. It felt wrong, too solid, too sealed. Like it wasn't meant to lead somewhere, but meant to hold something in. Something that should not be allowed out. Still, I was supposed to check the locks. That was the rule. The rule also mentioned one more thing. Ignore the screaming. I didn't want to believe that part when I read it. I figured it was just written that way for effect. Something to creep out new hires. But standing here now, with my ears straining in the silence, I heard it. Faint at first. So faint, I thought maybe it was the freezer humming wrong. Then it rose, high and distant, like someone screaming behind several walls. It wasn't angry. Wasn't even clear. Just pain. Repeating. Not words, not names, just human sound over and over, like it was on a loop. I reached out again. My fingers were just inches from the padlock when I heard it. A meow. Soft. Calm. I turned. Ripley. He was sitting at the far end of the aisle, right where it opened back toward the front of the store. His good eye was focused on me. He meowed again. Not loud, not angry, but sharp, like a warning. I lowered my hand slowly. All right, you're the boss, I said. I backed away from the door, turning carefully. The screams hadn't stopped. They were still going up and down in volume, as if someone were being dragged across a floor, just out of reach. Ripley didn't move, not at first. He just sat there, tail wrapped neatly around his paws, watching me, waiting. Then he turned and walked off like nothing had happened. I followed him back up the aisle, past the old chip rack and the buzzing freezers. The screams faded behind me, like they didn't want to cross the threshold of that aisle. Back at the counter, I picked up the pen again and marked the paper. Rule 2, check the locks. Check. The third rule was just as simple as the other ones. Rule 3, clean around the gas station. No need to clean outside. It's the inside that counts, or so they say. You'll find weird things lying around from previous customers who like to drop things. Candy wrapper here, paper cup there, a loose tooth maybe, or an old photograph with a head's missing. Just throw it all away. Keep the place clean, it read. That one made me laugh a little first time I read it. A loose tooth? Seemed like a joke someone typed out for fun. Still, well, the place could use a little tidying. Wasn't gross, but it had that look of somewhere no one really took care of. Dust around the corners, empty cup under the chip rack, sticky patch by the slushy machine, that sort of thing. I pulled my phone out and started playing music while I cleaned. Mostly old stuff, radio hits, little rock, something to break up the silence. I found a broom behind the counter and a roll of thin plastic garbage bags. Ripley followed me around for a bit, then curled up near the red bowl and dozed off. I started in the candy aisle. There was a half-sucked lollipop stuck in the bottom shelf. I had to scrape it off with a key I found in the drawer. Then there were 2 soda cans behind the sunglasses rack and a single sock on top of the snack display. Not a pair, just one. Weird, but not impossible. Then I saw the photograph. It was lying near the fridge that barely worked, face up on the floor. Black and white, little curled at the edges. Looked like something someone's grandma might keep in a box in the attic. The picture showed a family, 2 adults, a girl, a boy, standing in front of a carnival booth. Balloons in the background, some kind of striped tent behind them. They were all dressed nicely. The boy even had a little tie. But none of them had heads. Not blurred, not faded, just gone, like they were never drawn in. Their necks stopped where their collars started, clean and flat, like cut paper dolls. I turned the photo over, nothing on the back, no writing, no date. I didn't feel right throwing it away, so I slipped it under the counter near the sardine box. Then I kept cleaning, and the weird stuff kept coming, but I got used to it. Bottle caps with teeth marks, candy wrappers folded into tiny origami birds. Once, I found a pair of tiny red shoes in the freezer next to a frozen burrito. They were child-sized and spotless, like someone had placed them there on purpose. Then there were the photos. At first, just 1 or 2, tucked under shelves or dropped behind the drink coolers. But after that first week, I started finding them everywhere, folded behind snack displays, stuffed behind pages of old magazines, slid between cracks in the counter. They were always black and white, curled at the edges with that worn paper feel, like they'd been handled too many times. Some were clearly from long ago, town parades, old ribbon cuttings, a Boy Scout troop in front of a flagpole. Others seemed newer, maybe a few decades back at most. Kids posing at a fountain, teens outside a diner, families standing in front of storefronts. Every photo had one thing in common. No one had a head. The bodies were dressed up nice. Everyone stood still, smiling, holding hands or balloons or newspapers, but where their heads should have been, there was nothing. No blurring, no damage, no signs of age. Just clean, flat space above the collars, like someone had taken scissors and trimmed them off with perfect precision. I never found two of the same photo. Never found anyone who looked familiar. Just headless crowds caught in moments they probably thought were ordinary when the picture was taken. I stopped throwing them out after a while. I didn't want them, but I couldn't make myself toss them either. They didn't feel like trash. They felt... I don't know how they felt. Not like trash. So I tucked them in a drawer under the register. The same drawer where I kept the item the faceless man had handed me on the first night. The one I still hadn't dared to look at. But even with the pictures, even with the little red shoes and the candy birds, nothing ever felt immediately dangerous. After a few nights, I got into a rhythm. Show up just before midnight, check the rules, feed Ripley, clean a little, watch the clock. Sometimes I read or looked through the old magazines in the rack. Nobody ever came in. The gas pump outside never beeped. The register never rang. Ripley sat with me most nights. He didn't beg for food after the first feeding, just kept close. One time, he hopped up onto the register and pressed a paw onto the keypad. I laughed, scratched his head, and told him he was not getting my paycheck. It was easy. It was weird, but it was my routine. Until the fourth night. At 2 a.m., I saw headlights through the glass. It was quiet. I just finished sweeping up the chip aisle. I looked up and saw a red Ford sitting under the one working street lamp out front. It hadn't been there when I looked up 10 minutes ago. I stepped closer to the window. The car was clean, shiny even, like someone had just washed it. The street lamp lit the whole front of it clearly, and inside the car, sitting still as stone, was a man. He didn't move, just sat in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel. He wore a deep velvet suit, dark purple or maroon. I couldn't tell from where I stood. He had a green cane leaning against his shoulder. It was chipped and crooked. But his face... he didn't have a face. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just skin, smooth and blank, like a wax doll that never got finished. I didn't know what to do. He didn't look at me. He couldn't. But I felt like he was. I ran back to the counter and looked at the paper again, scanned down past the rules I already checked off. And there it was. Rule number 4. Lock the doors when you see a red Ford outside. It read, "There's a man with no face that sits in the lot in his red car under the street lamp at exactly 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. He never comes inside, but sometimes he watches from outside the glass windows. He wears a velvet suit with a green cane that has seen better days, but he wears no face. Keep the doors locked until he leaves." My heart dropped. I hadn't locked the doors. I spun around to grab the key, and then I saw him again. Not outside. Inside. He was standing in the snack aisle, I hadn't even heard the door open. Not even a sound. 1 minute, the man in the red Ford was sitting under the street lamp outside, still as a statue. The next, he was standing in the snack aisle, like he'd always been there, like I'd forgotten he was supposed to be outside at all. I had no idea how long he'd been standing there before I noticed. He wasn't moving, not even a twitch. His velvet suit clung to him like it'd been tailored yesterday. It was a deep, dark red, almost the same color as dried berries, and there was not one wrinkle on it. Over one arm, he carried a long green cane, thin and bent at the top, like someone had used it too many times or dropped it too hard. The cane touched the floor beside him, but didn't help him walk. At least not that I could see. But his face, just a smooth, blank space, like an artist had started making a person, but got tired halfway through and just left his face unfinished. The skin was pale and slightly stretched, like it'd been pulled too tight over something underneath. And then I remembered the rule. My eyes darted across the typed lines until I found what I was looking for. Rule number 5, in case of emergency. It read, if you happen to not lock the doors in time and the man comes in, keep your head down and don't look at him. Allow him to roam the aisles. You'll know where he is by the tapping of his cane. Answer his questions if he needs help finding something, and accept whatever he gives you when he pays. It's not always cash. You'll know he's left when the cane fades away. I didn't know what to do besides follow the rule. The whole shift so far had gone fine because I followed the rules exactly. I wasn't about to stop now. So I sat down on the stool behind the counter, rested my arms on my knees, and dropped my head until I was staring at the gum under the counter ledge. I didn't lift my gaze. I didn't breathe too loud. I didn't move. And then I heard it. A tapping. It was soft, measured, slow. Not like a cane someone needed to walk. More like a metronome. It echoed lightly off the tile floor, getting louder as he got closer. I kept my eyes down. I didn't want to see where he was. I didn't want to see what his body looked like up close, or what it felt like to have someone with no face just a few feet away. The tapping stopped for a second. I heard the sound of plastic crinkling, then paper rustling. It was faint, but I knew it. Someone checking prices, flipping labels, digging through shelves. He was browsing. Then the cane tapped again. He was getting closer. The taps grew louder until they weren't far away anymore. They were right across from me. I could feel him standing there at the register, waiting. Something about the silence told me he wasn't just browsing anymore. He was ready to interact. Then, without any kind of warning or shift in the air, he spoke. His voice was smooth and careful. It didn't sound like a whisper or a threat. It sounded like someone asking a question out of habit. "Do you sell lighters here?" Something about hearing him talk made it worse. I wasn't sure where the sound was coming from. It wasn't muffled. It wasn't echoing. It was just there. A voice floating in front of me, like someone had turned on a recording. Still staring at the floor, I answered. "Yeah, right in front of you. Small rack next to the candy." There was a pause. I heard the sound of something small and metal being picked up. Then nothing. Just silence. I didn't move. He didn't ask anything else. Didn't say thank you. Didn't comment. Then after a few more seconds, I heard a soft sound. A small object placed on the counter. Not heavy. Something about the size of a wallet or a phone, maybe, with a flat surface and a faint scrape as it touched down. I didn't look. I reached up blindly, slid the object off the counter, and tucked it into the drawer under the register. It felt cold, a little too smooth. I didn't take a closer look. The tapping began again. He was leaving. Every step felt like a weight being lifted. The taps grew softer as he walked away from the register, past the drinks, back down the aisles. Then they became faint, and then they vanished. No beep from the door, no sound of a car starting, but I knew he was gone. I looked back at the paper on the counter, and my eyes drifted to the next line. Rule number 6. If you happen to look straight at him, pray. There was nothing else written after that. No instructions, no details. Just that one line. I sat back, my hands gripping the edge of the counter, and tried not to think too hard about what would have happened if I hadn't looked away in time, and what might still happen if I ever looked straight at him. By the end of my first week, I had the routine down cold. Ripley got his sardines before the clock hit 12. The floors were clean enough to eat off of. And the red Ford showed up every single night at exactly 2 a.m., just like the rule said. But now I was ready. I watched the clock like it owed me money. The moment it ticked to 1:59, I locked the doors and I turned the key hard. Every night, the man with no face sat quietly in the lot for an hour under the flickering light. He never moved, never got out, just sat there in the driver's seat. I didn't look too long. I didn't want to get curious about things I shouldn't. By Friday, I was starting to feel like a professional. Nothing had gone wrong, no accidents, no surprises. Ripley and I had our rhythm, and I even started organizing the magazine rack just to kill time. The rules were weird, yeah, but they worked. You follow them, you're fine. That Friday night, about an hour into my shift, the front door slid open. I jumped a little at the sound. No one had come in all week. The place was supposed to be mine alone, except for the occasional red Ford and my one-eyed cat coworker. A man stepped inside. Tall, thin, mid-40s, maybe older. He wore a navy jacket, jeans, and boots scuffed at the toes like he'd had them for years. His hair was dark, but streaked with silver at the sides. He looked around the store like he'd been here 1,000 times. When his eyes landed on me, he gave a nod. "You Charlie?" he said. Yeah, you Mason?" He walked over to the counter and held out a hand. His grip was dry and firm, but not too strong. "Yeah, it's good to finally meet you in person. I usually don't come by unless I need to. Figured I'd check in. First week, it's always the hardest." Mason smirked a little and looked around the place. It's clean, huh? Cats fed, rules followed, not bad." He moved behind the counter like it was his own house and reached for the coffee machine. He poured 2 cups from the burned old pot I'd made earlier. It tasted like it'd been brewed through a dirty sock, but I didn't complain. We sat down on the stools, each with a cup, and for a minute we just sipped in silence. I said after a few sips, "So, is that guy in the red Ford, normal?" Mason glanced at me over his coffee. "Well, define normal." I mean, he's here every night. Doesn't do anything. Just sits. I read the rules, I followed them, but, I mean, who is he? Why does he come here?" Mason leaned back, resting one arm on the counter. His eyes narrowed just a little. Not like he was mad, more like he was deciding what to say. "Well, there's a story. Goes back a long time. Before this station. Before most of what you see around here. There used to be a man who owned half the town. Some say more. Real estate, banks, businesses, apartments, churches, even schools. If it was built, chances are he had a hand in it. He didn't build it all out of kindness, though. It was greed. He lived in a mansion up the hill. You can't see it from the road anymore. Trees grew in too thick, but it is still there. Falling apart now, but solid stone, high ceilings, windows big enough to drive through. Back then, it was a palace." "What happened?" I asked. Mason didn't answer right away. He just looked down at his coffee, like it had something written inside it. "One night, something snapped. Nobody knows why. Some say his wife left. Some say his fortune got drained in a deal gone wrong. Others say he just woke up and lost his mind. Whatever the reason, he locked the doors to that mansion and he killed everyone. Servants, family, everything. After that, he disappeared. Cops searched the whole county. Never found him. But the locals, well, they believe he never left." "You mean the guy in the car?" I asked. He nodded. "Well, they say he's stuck here. Not just in town, but really stuck. Like part of the land now. Part of the places he used to own. Shows up where he used to walk. Where he used to rule. The gas station's one of those spots. He helped build it, long before it was anything more than a dusty plot and a promise." I stared into my coffee a minute before asking, "What's behind the red door?" Mason didn't react right away. He kept sipping, eyes distant, like I hadn't spoken. But I knew he heard me. I continued. "And the screaming, it's not just once. Some nights it goes on for hours. Same tone, same rhythm. And the photos, I keep finding them. People with no heads. Parades, diners, fountains. Always the same, always the heads gone." Mason finally looked at me. His expression wasn't angry, just tired. "Some things aren't meant to make sense, Charlie." I waited, but he didn't say more. He took another drink of his coffee and looked around the store. The lights buzzed faintly. Ripley lay curled on the counter, like none of it mattered. "This place, doesn't follow the same rules as the rest of the world. You try to pin it down, try to fit it into what you already know. It'll break something in you. Or worse, it won't. And you will just keep on asking," Mason said. I looked down at the counter, at the rule sheet with its stained corners. "Some doors aren't meant to open, son. Some questions don't have answers. Or maybe they do, but the answers change depending on who's asking. Either way, it's best not to chase them." I nodded slowly at that. I didn't like it, but I understood. We sat there for a while longer, drinking bad coffee in a quiet store under buzzing lights. Ripley hopped up on the corner and curled next to the cash register, purring soft. And I didn't say it out loud, but for the first time since I got here, I felt like I understood the kind of job I'd taken. So I kept the job. Wasn't hard, shifts were quiet, the money came in at the end of each night, and the rules, strange as they were, worked. You follow them, you stay safe. That's the deal. It's more honest than most places I've worked. A month passed, then 2. The red Ford showed up every night like clockwork. 2 a.m. sharp, packed under the broken streetlight that buzzed just enough to cast his car in a half glow. I locked the doors every time. I used to think I'd only do this for the summer, save up some cash, pay off tuition, move on. That was the plan. But something about this place held me longer than I expected. The strange rules stopped bothering me. I kept the station clean. I fed Ripley his sardines. I stopped asking why the doors had to stay locked, or why the chains on the red door never moved. Still, in my downtime, I started digging. I couldn't stop thinking about the man in the red Ford. I started small. Local history blogs, library archives, quiet questions at the diner on my days off. Most people didn't want to talk about it. A few got that look, like they knew what I was asking but didn't want to say the words. Eventually, I found a name, Samson Field. He was a wealthy developer who lived in this area around 80 years ago, built up neighborhoods, funded churches, made himself the centerpiece of every town council meeting. Some records praised him for creating jobs. Others hinted at shady deals, missing people, family matters that were quietly swept away. But one night, after hours of flipping through digitized newspaper clippings at the campus library, I found a photo. It was small, grainy, probably taken at a party or a ribbon-cutting ceremony. The man in the center wore a velvet suit. A thin cane rested at his side. His face was turned slightly toward the camera. The photo had aged poorly, but you could still make out the faint shape of his smile. It was the same suit, same cut, same green cane. No doubt in my mind. I stared at that photo for a long time. I wasn't the type to believe in the paranormal, not before this job. There are rules to this place, not just written ones, but ones beneath the surface. Old stories baked into the dirt, names no one says out loud anymore. Some of those rules keep things out, some keep them in, and some are just there to remind you that not everything in the world is meant to be understood. As for me, I like the job. I like the quiet. I like the feeling of knowing what to expect, even if what I expect is a man without a face showing up. But most of all, I like Ripley. He's the only one who really feels like a coworker. He meets me at the door every night. He purrs when I pop open the sardines. He curls up on the counter when I sit down for my midnight break. I still think his missing eye makes him look like a pirate. A tired, lazy, one-eyed pirate who's seen more of this world than I ever will. I don't know how long I'll stay here. Maybe just through the next semester, maybe longer. There's always something else to learn. Another rule, another name, another thing hiding just outside the light. I've stopped asking questions. The night shift runs smoother that way. My name is Jack. I'm a volunteer ranger stationed out in a nowhere patch of Appalachia the map doesn't bother labeling. If you think that sounds like a noble job, you've never done it. Most days, I sit in a crooked wooden chair on the front porch of a government-funded shack that smells like old boots and scorched coffee. I watch trees sway and make sure no idiot tourist stumbles into something they won't come back from. Technically, I'm not supposed to be here, or anywhere outside a concrete cell. If you go by my original sentencing. Got 5 years for robbery. No gun, no hostages, just bad choices and a friend with worse ideas. The judge called me a cautionary tale. Said I should use the time to think real hard about who I want to be. The Institute gave me an alternative. They needed bodies out in the red zones, and I had the right mix of dumb and desperate. Traded prison bars for ranger greens, and here I am. The cabin's got power, barely. Coffee runs 24/7 from a cracked percolator with a mean streak. We've got a working radio, some old maps, and a corkboard full of tacks and yarn lines that don't make sense unless you have been here a long time. A delivery guy from the valley brings us pizza when the road's clear. The place that hired me doesn't advertise when it needs somebody. Apparently, they call it the Institute. Never heard of it, but it exists. And out here, it's the only reason the mountains haven't swallowed the town's whole. People don't know it, but monsters are real. Not movie monsters with catchphrases and theme music. Real ones. The kind with too many joints in the wrong places. Or no face. They live past the fog line, and they don't like being watched. Me and Roger, we're what you get before the real hunters show up. We tag the creatures when we can, track migration patterns, warn hikers off with fake trail closures and wildlife signs. Every now and then, we radio it in, and somebody with better weapons and worse bedside manner comes through to clean up. Roger's my supervisor. Older than dirt, just as bad-tempered. Been doing this job since before I was born, I think. He knows all the rules, including the ones they don't write down anymore. Talks like someone filed his voice with a rasp and then glued it back together wrong. He's got one hip that clicks when he walks, and a theory about how all pizza went downhill after 1998. We fight about toppings more than protocol. But he's decent. Calls me son sometimes without meaning to, and I don't correct him. Roger's name isn't on the door, but it might as well be. He's been running this outpost longer than some of the trees have been standing. First time I met him, he told me 2 things. 1, coffee's always free. And 2, he doesn't tolerate whining, and I respect that. He's in his 50s, looks older though. Acts younger. Walks with a limp from a bad fall in the 90s, but still hikes faster than I do on a good day. Keeps a radio clipped to his belt like it's part of his body. Doesn't use it unless he has to. He believes in eyes, not electronics. He doesn't smile much. His laugh sounds like gravel getting dragged across concrete. He chews mints instead of smoking, drinks coffee black as tar, and still reads printed reports even though I keep showing him how the tablet works. Calls it witchcraft and goes back to his clipboard. Despite all that, he is very sharp. Sharp enough to train rookies, fix a busted perimeter alarm, and tell the difference between a bobcat and a monster by the spacing in the tracks. He's been with the Institute since before they were official. He calls it the job like it's the only one that's ever mattered. I guess for him it is. Speaking of, the Institute is a lot more widespread than I initially thought it was. Most people just don't know it exists. Started quiet. Small teams, scattered bases, all operating in secret. The kind of secret where if you know about it, you're either part of it or something's gone very, very wrong. These days, it's a little more organized. Still hidden, still serious, but there's structure now. Divisions, clearance levels, training manuals. Still, No public website or HR department, but that's not the kind of place this is. Their job, and now ours, is simple in theory. Keep the monsters out of sight and the public out of danger. They don't hunt every creature. Not all of them are hostile. Some are just, well, displaced, migrating, lost. But the dangerous ones, the ones that take, twist, feed, those get flagged. And more often than not, they get put down. We're not hunters, not officially. Me and Roger, we're field rangers. That means we're the first boots on the ground when something moves weird in the woods. We track signs, we check cameras, we make notes on migration patterns, nesting spots, and energy shifts. We set markers, update maps, log disturbances. If something crosses the fog line that shouldn't be there, we call it in. And yeah, that's the job, you know? Surveillance, containment, prevention. Most days are boring. Wake up, drink stale coffee, check the perimeter. Then we go through our rounds, walking the trails, reading data from motion sensors, and replacing broken camo netting. If it rained, we look for unusual tracks. If it didn't, we check for dried ones. Once in a while, we find something worth calling in. A deep gouge in a tree trunk too high for a bear. A pile of feathers arranged in a spiral. Missing hikers found in a ditch with all their blood drained and only their index finger missing. Those are the busy days, the bad days. Our cabin's small. One long room with bunks and a heater that clicks when it's cold. A shared bathroom. A common area with the usual maps, files, old trail guides, a beat-up first aid kit. We've got a backup generator, but the power grid out here is good enough most weeks. No Wi-Fi, just a landline that goes straight to the regional field office and a shortwave radio for backup. There's a porch with a lookout scope and a rusted bench that creaks when you sit on it. The view's good. On a clear day, you can see down into the red zone. The trees don't look different from here, but we know better. I've learned to listen to Roger. He says if the birds go quiet too fast, pack up and leave. If your flashlight flickers when the batteries are new, leave it behind. And if you find footprints with toes pointing backward, don't follow them. I started writing this down to make sense of things. Not for a book deal or some report to hand in, just for me. The days, they blend out here. The rules are strange. Sometimes you need to see the words to believe the memories are real. I figured if I kept it all in my head, it'd rot there. So this is my journal now. A way to track what's happened, what I've seen, what I still don't understand. I've got stories, plenty of them. Some I wish I didn't. But they're mine. And if I don't write them down, no one will. My name is Jack, and I'm a volunteer ranger in the Appalachia. These are my stories. Alright, story number 1. I remember the first time I ever saw a monster. A real monster. You never forget the first time you see one. Mine was a ridgeback crawler. Long as a sedan, maybe longer. Skin looked like wet bark, like something peeled off a tree and left out too long in the rain. Didn't move right. All bent limbs and slow shifts. We found it early one morning, about a mile off trail. A storm had come through the night before, knocked over half the ridge. Trees down everywhere. Mud thick enough to eat your boots. Roger spotted it first. We were cutting through a narrow path when he stopped short, held a hand up. "Don't move," he said. I followed his line of sight. At first, all I saw was a mess of roots and broken branches. Then I noticed something wedged under a fallen pine. It twitched. It made a sound. Low, hurt. Not like an animal, Not quite. Closer to a pressure valve trying to release. Then it opened its eyes. Yellow. No pupils. They didn't blink. Just stared, slow and wide. "What is that?" I asked. Roger squatted near it, careful to keep his weight back. "That's a crawler. Ridgeback, by the look of it," he said. It tried to pull itself free, but the tree was too heavy. Its back was arched wrong, like the weight had cracked something inside. I took a step closer, hand on the sidearm the Institute issued me. "Don't shoot it," Roger said without even looking at me. "It's moving," I replied. "It's dying, and the Institute doesn't pay for panic fire," he replied. I kept my hand on the grip, but I didn't pull it. The monster stared at us as a thick black liquid leaked from its mouth. The smell was awful. Part roadkill, part gasoline. "What's it doing here? Aren't they supposed to stay north?" I asked. Roger nodded. "Yeah, usually. But things have been drifting lately. Same reason we had trolls show up east last season." He stepped back and dug into his pack, pulled out a small leather-bound book with a rubber band around it, tossed it to me. "Here, catch." I opened it. The pages were water-warped and dog-eared, notes scribbled in pen and pencil, some in different handwriting. Rough sketches, field notes, little maps. It looked like a monster hunter's Bible, except beat to hell and probably older than me. "This yours?" I asked. He shook his head. "Used to be mine. Belonged to a hunter before that, and another before her. And now it's yours." I flipped through it. Everything was categorized by region. Northern woods, valley basin, river caves. Each section had entries for known monsters. Some just had a name and a one-line warning. Others had paragraphs, full reports. The Ridgeback crawler was in there, sketched sideways with a red X across the spine. I ran my finger down the list. "Says they don't usually travel solo," I said. "They don't. So it's best we get a move on," he replied. I tore a fresh page from the back of the book, flipped to the crawler entry, and began writing. Added the time, location, condition, behavior. Then I sketched the angle it was trapped at, just rough lines, penciled in notes about the fluid leaking from its mouth. We radioed it in once we were sure it wasn't going anywhere. The Institute sent a tagging team the next morning. 3 guys in sealed suits with tranquilizers, scanners, and a truck built like a mobile freezer. They didn't talk much, just tagged it, logged the location, and hauled it off under heavy restraints. I learned a lot more about monsters after that. Crawlers especially. You see, crawlers don't kill clean. They don't go for the throat like a wolf or crush like a bear. They take their time. They drag. They break joints first. They move fast when they want to, low to the ground, all elbows and speed. They'll scale trees to wait, drop on you from above, or slither under brush for hours without making a single sound. You don't hear them until they're already touching you. Roger once told me a crawler wiped out a whole trail crew on the North Line. 5 guys. 2 of them had sidearms. None of them got a shot off. Not a single shot. When the Institute arrived, they found dead bodies littering the ridge like a massacred campsite. One crawler was hard to deal with, but they rarely traveled solo. They were pack monsters, And pack monsters could devastate entire towns if they wanted to. Back at the cabin that night, I flipped through the rest of the guide. Trolls to the east, like he said. Big things, slow but mean. There were entries marked with dates, like incident reports. One from 5 years ago. Troll, 10 foot, spotted East Ridge, took dog, avoid tree lines after dusk. Another from last fall. Smaller troll, newborn maybe. Watched from the hill, didn't engage. Other pages had more scribbles than sentences. One just read, "Do not talk near the old quarry. Wakes him up." "Hey Roger, how many types are these?" I asked. He was at the table boiling water for instant noodles. Too many. The mountains hide things the cities don't believe in. You will run into crawlers, trolls, goblins, maybe even a snatcher if you're unlucky." "Snatchers?" I asked. "Yeah, they drag folks off and leave your clothes folded behind. Usually stay deep valley. You'll know 'em if you hear the clicking," he said without looking up. I flipped to a page that just said Snatcher in big letters. No notes, no drawing, just blank space underneath. "Not a lot of info on this one," I said. "Because the ones who get close don't usually come back to describe anything," he replied. Fair enough. I started updating the guide with a fresh pencil, fixed some of the faded entries, cleaned up the sketch of the crawler, added today's date and location, and then I added a note. Observed crawler alone, no visible wounds beyond crush damage, smelled like rot and fuel. Roger leaned over my shoulder at some point, watching me write. "You take neat notes for a convict," he said. I didn't bother replying. After a while, he pulled up a chair and sat across from me. "They all hunt for food, you know. Every single one of them." "Even trolls?" I replied. "Especially trolls. Flesh is flesh. And once they get a taste for human, they always come back. Doesn't matter how far they wander." "Why us, though?" He shrugged at that. "They like the taste. Easy prey." He stirred his noodles and kept talking. "You ever notice how we walk through the woods with our heads down? Youngsters looking at their phones, snapping pictures. That's why they hunt us. We don't look up. We're never aware of where we are. Our survival instincts are pretty low for a species as a whole, nowadays especially," he explained. I didn't say anything, just wrote it down. When I looked up again, Roger had gone quiet. He was staring out the window with that long, empty stare he gets sometimes, the kind that tells you he's seeing something you don't. I put the guidebook away and sat back. Outside, the wind moved through the trees slow and steady. I remember thinking it sounded like something big breathing down on us. Story 2. Well, that was the story about the first time I saw a monster. Saw plenty more after that, but crawlers will always be burned into my brain. After that, Roger figured it was time to earn my stripes. Seeing one is one thing. Getting close enough to touch one, that's a whole different game. And that brings me to the first time I had to tag a monster. Tagging is the most important part of the job, even if it's the part nobody brags about. It's not glamorous, it's not heroic. It's crawling through dirt and praying whatever you're tracking doesn't suddenly decide it's hungry. The Institute keeps files on every monster they know about. Species, habits, sightings, behavior shifts. But that data doesn't just appear. Somebody has to gather it. That's where we come in. Rangers, tour guides, whatever name they give us, it doesn't matter. We're the ones out here tagging things, while the lab coats stay warm and dry back at the base. Sometimes the rookie hunters get sent out here for tagging too. But those guys are the firepower. Guys like me are the taggers. The job means getting very close. Close enough to identify the species, slap on a tracker, and get out without losing your face. The Institute sorts the monsters by color code. Blue for docile, harmless unless provoked, like fairies, mermaids, and a few species of giants. Yellow for unpredictable. Mood can shift fast, and they tend to break patterns, like goblins who can be bargained with, or witches, and some species of ogre. Red is for hostile. If you see one, you probably don't walk away from it. These are the vampires and most giant sea monsters. My first tag was a code yellow, a mossback. Ugly thing. Walk like a deer that had never figured out how legs were supposed to bend. Looked like driftwood covered in moss, with patches of fungus stuck along its sides. Almost beautiful if you didn't know what it was. We found it under a covered bridge 2 valleys west of camp. Locals had reported weird smells and animal bones showing up near the water. The Institute flagged it for survey, and Roger brought me along. Well, you're up. Think of it like tagging a cow, but the cow might decide to rip your face off, he said, sliding the tracker into my hand. We waited until sundown. Mossbacks are nocturnal, and they like tight spaces, places that echo. Bridges are perfect for that. Sure enough, just past dark, we spotted it, crawling up the riverbed like it owned the place. 4 legs, low to the ground, didn't make a sound. Roger kept watch from the road, rifle across his lap. I slid down the embankment and crawled under the bridge. My hands sank into wet mud, but I didn't stop. I kept low, moving slow, till I was about 20 feet away. Then 10. And the smell hit me first. It was like pond water and rot. Then it turned its head, and I saw the thing grafted into its neck. A human jaw. Not bone. Flesh. Still damp. Looked like it'd been chewed and stuck there like some kind of prize. I don't know if it was part of the creature or just something I'd taken from a body. The Institute still doesn't know if mossbacks mutate from eating too many human parts, or if they're just born like that. I held my breath, leaned in, and slapped the tracker just behind the front leg. It twitched but didn't bolt. I hit it with a light sedative, enough to make it sluggish, not enough to knock it out. Roger's voice came over the radio. All right, tag clean, time to go. I backed out slow, boots sinking into the bank, and didn't stand up until I was back on the trail. We called it in, and the Institute sent a retrieval crew. They said the tag took, said the readings looked strange but consistent. I didn't ask what that meant. Roger handed me a clipboard and said, "Congratulations. You've officially poked something dangerous and lived to log it." Now's my first tag. I have done, dozens since. But that one sticks. The way it looked at me when I moved. Like it didn't care what I was. Just wondered how long I'd last if it felt like chewing. Alright, story number 3. The first time I met a hunter, I didn't even know what I was looking at. Up until then, hunters were a line item in the Ranger's handbook. I'd heard the name tossed around by Roger and a few other field guys. Always said in that way people talk about someone they both respect and fear. like myth wrapped in denim or old leather. But this guy just walked in off the trail one day like he was lost, and nothing about what happened after that felt normal. We were about halfway through our second shift when a call came in. Family reported missing kid on the Ridge Trail, 9 years old. Kid's name was Jameson. One minute he's picking flowers, next minute he's gone. Happens out here sometimes. Not always because of monsters either, but this one felt different. Roger and I were first to the scene. The parents were already at the station when we got there, crying, shaking, barely keeping it together. Mom kept repeating the same thing over and over again. It took him. I saw it. It took him. When I asked what it was, the dad said the thing looked like a tree with arms, bigger than any man, probably 7 feet tall, and didn't respond to noise when the dad tried chasing after his kid. I exchanged a look with Roger, and he didn't have to say anything. I knew he was thinking troll. That was the part that didn't sit right. Trolls weren't supposed to be in these woods. Not this deep in Appalachia. Not this season. Then the door opened, and in walked a guy I'd never seen before. Didn't look like much, rough around the edges, pack slung across his shoulder. But there was a calm about him that didn't match the chaos in the room. Most people walk into a station mid-crisis and ask what's going on. This guy walked in like he already knew. Roger recognized him instantly. "Carver, didn't expect to see you here," he said. Carver nodded like this was just another Tuesday. He mentioned that he'd been passing through and asked what was going on. Roger gave him the quick rundown. The kid, the trail, the description. Carver barely reacted, just listened. When Roger finished, Carver stared at the floor tile for a second, did some kind of mental math, then said, "Show me the trail." I watched him disappear into the trees with one of our senior rangers. I didn't go with him, wasn't cleared, and Roger told me to stay behind. But I couldn't stop thinking about that guy. He didn't flinch, didn't hesitate, and he definitely didn't look like someone doing this for the first time. They came back hours later, and Carver was carrying the kid. He walked out of the woods like it was nothing. The kid, Jameson, was covered in mud, eyes wide, arms locked around the man's neck like he was holding on to the last safe thing in the world. Behind them, the wind kicked up like something had been left behind, and didn't like it. Carver didn't say much when he got back, just handed the kid over to the parents, gave Roger a quick debrief, then stepped aside and started packing up his gear. I walked over to him. Had to. "You're a hunter?" I asked. He looked over at me, mumbled a half answer that made it obvious he wanted to get going. I wanted to ask more. How he found the kid, what happened in the woods. But something in his face told me not to. Not right now. Roger came over, clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Jack, meet Sam Carver. Been doing this longer than most of us have had radios." Carver nodded at me, then kept packing. Later that night, Roger told me what really happened out there. Said Carver tracked the troll solo. No backup. Followed it into the woods until he found the pit where it stashed the boy. He used a flare and a net lined with wolf's bane to disorient it. Got the kid out, tagged the creature, and walked home. And the part that really stuck, he wasn't even assigned to the case. Just stumbled on it. Stepped in because he could. "Isn't that against protocol?" I asked. Roger grunted. "Yeah, that's Carver for you." A few weeks later, the Institute sent out a memo. Not to us directly, but we heard about it. said something about cross-regional movement, creatures migrating into areas they hadn't been seen in for decades. Trolls, crawlers, worse. I asked Roger what that meant. He looked tired when he answered. Means the maps we've been working off are useless. Means the job just got harder. I sat with that for a long time. Something within the region was changing, and we were going to feel the effects of it sooner rather than later. Story 4. The thing about meeting a real hunter like Carver is that it changes your idea of what bravery looks like. The guy walked into the woods alone, came back with a kid. He had no backup, but never panicked. I had met some tough men during my time behind bars, but this was different. So naturally, I figured the next time something went wrong, the Institute would send another Carver, or someone like him. They didn't, because I got there first. We were assigned to clear the South Ridge Trail. Easy job on paper. Some school had a field trip out in the hills, and our job was to walk the perimeter, check for any weird signs, then stay out of the way unless someone wandered too close to the wrong tree line. Babysitting duty, as Roger called it. It was calm at first. Blue skies, bugs buzzing, group of fourth graders getting excited about moss. I was halfway through sipping my third cup of cold coffee when we got the call over the radio. Unit 7, we got a missing kid, the static radio said. Roger stiffened. Copy. Last known location? Roger asked. Yeah, marked by the big rock near Cooper's Ridge. He was with his group 1 second and gone the next, the voice on the radio said. We didn't waste time. Cooper's wasn't on the map anymore. It had been removed years ago. Too many sightings. Too much bad luck. The kind of place we usually tag with red string and avoid mentioning in casual conversation. Roger called it in. Protocol says you report missing minors near a red zone immediately and wait for the Institute team to arrive. They told us to sit tight. Help was 20 minutes out. I looked at Roger. He looked back. You're thinking about it, aren't you? He said. He's a kid? He nodded at that. All right, I'll cover you from the ridge. Take a flare. The trail down was narrow and steep. Lots of roots. Lots of places to fall if you didn't know where your feet were going. I found him crouched behind a rotting log, hugging his knees, shaking hard enough to rattle. He looked up when he heard me. His face was wet with tears and mud. Hey, kid, you're safe. Come on, I said. Then I saw it. Behind him, crouched low, a dark thing with long, jointed limbs and no neck. The skin looked oily, stretched too tight. Its elbows were wrong, too many of them, bent in ways that didn't follow any kind of anatomy I knew. It hadn't noticed me yet, but it was breathing. I didn't have time to think. I pulled the flare from my belt, snapped the cap off, and lit it with my glove. It flared bright red in the dim gulch light. The thing screeched, reared back, eyes flaring white as it tried to shield its face. And I didn't wait to see if it worked. I grabbed the kid with one arm, hoisted him like a sack of flour, and I ran. It followed. I could hear the thing crashing through brush behind us, shrieking like it was drowning in its own voice. Its eyes were still fogged from the light, but that didn't stop it from tracking. Its claws raked trees and rocks as it lunged after us. I didn't look back. We ran until I couldn't feel my legs. The ridge curved west, and we cut through a shallow stream, hoping the water would kill the trail. The kid clung to me, quiet, scared. but not slowing me down. Good kid. At some point, I didn't hear the thing anymore. Just wind. Just birds starting up again. We waited behind a boulder for a few minutes. Then I walked him back out. Just a few miles from the ranger station now. We were in green territory again. When the Institute boys arrived, they were suited up and armed to the teeth. Late, of course. They were younger than Carver, younger than even me. They moved in like it was a training exercise, calm and slow, while I sat with the kid on the gravel, trying to keep my hands from shaking. They took statements, took the flare casing, took the credit, idiots. But I didn't care. The kid was alive, and that's what mattered. Roger didn't say much when they left. He just handed me a slice of pizza from the cooler, the good kind. The one with extra meat he usually hoarded for himself. I thought maybe I'd get a talking to. Maybe, a write-up for breaking protocol. But nothing ever came. The Institute let it go, probably because it would have made them look bad to admit a mere ranger beat them to it. And that was fine by me. Still, though, something shifted after that. Roger started listening to me a little bit more. Trusted me a little deeper. I wasn't just the convict with a clipboard anymore. And that meant more to me than I'll ever care to admit. Yeah, and I guess that's the last story for now. My community service hours are up. Time served, as they say. 5 years walking ridge lines, tagging monsters, hauling gear, updating files. 5 years of doing a job no one really believes exists. Clipboard's full. The field guide's a mess of ink and dog-eared pages, but it's as updated as I could make it. Yesterday I turned in my badge, dropped off my rifle, gave back the tracker. The Institute sent a clear envelope with a final report form and a release letter. Said I was free to go, just like that. Roger was waiting out front. When I came out of the cabin for the last time, he didn't say anything at first. Just handed me a mug of coffee and stood beside me while we watched the wind cut through the trees. And then he stuck out his hand. It was a hard shake. Solid. Firm enough to say goodbye, and heavy enough to mean something else, too. Maybe it was respect. Maybe a warning. Maybe both. You got somewhere you're heading? I shrugged. I don't know yet. He nodded like that made sense. Well, the world's full of opportunities. I took a sip of coffee. It's also full of monsters. That got him to smile, just barely. Then he looked back at the trees. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't thinking about staying. You walk these woods long enough, you start to feel things. Like the mountains are watching. Like something out there knows your name. Maybe it's nothing. Or maybe the Institute doesn't really let anyone go. There's no official badge, no medal. Just a long walk back down the mountain at a file somewhere that says my name and the words assignment complete. Still, I'm not sure I'm done. Not really. But for now, I'm heading out. If you're reading this, I'm going to assume one of two things. One, you stumbled across this journal by accident, in which case, close it now. Put it back where you found it. Walk away and never look at these woods the same again. Or two, you're someone like me. Maybe you screwed up somewhere back down the line. Maybe you're looking for something to give your life shape. If that's the case, you have got guts. This might be the best place for you. But if you're going to keep going, do yourself a favor, read the field guide, cover to cover. Make notes, cross things out, add your own. The Institute's official files are fine, but they don't breathe like a book that's been in the field. Learn how things move. Learn what they eat, what they fear, what they'll wait for. It'll save your life. Probably more than once. I don't know where I'm going next. Could be a diner in a small town. Could be another call from Roger. Maybe even a pizza place with bad floors and a good view. Doesn't matter. If we ever cross paths out there in the fog, you'll know me by the beat-up ranger jacket I wear. Roger let me keep it. Until then, watch the tree lines, check your corners, and keep moving. See you around. This is Ranger Jack, signing off. Hey, I hope you enjoyed the video. Special thank you to all my patrons. If you'd like to become a supporter on Patreon, there's a link in the description. I hope you have a great night, and thanks for watching. Commercial flying isn't mysterious. People who don't do it for a living tend to think it is. They imagine turbulence as danger, clouds as concealment, altitude as risk. From the cockpit, it's the opposite. Everything's measured and mapped. Every airway, altitude, every transition point exists because someone long before you figured out the safest, most efficient way to move aluminum through the air. By the time you reach an airline cockpit, the romance is gone. You trust procedures because they work. You trust instruments because they don't care how you feel. You trust airspace because it's regulated down to the mile and the minute. The sky, as far as we're concerned, is owned. Most flights blend together after a while. Push back, taxi, line up, climb, cruise, descend, land. Weather is either something you work around or something you delay for. Traffic is background noise. Emergencies are rare, and when they do happen, they follow predictable patterns. That's why training exists. That's why checklists exist. You're taught early on not to personalize anomalies. Systems fail sometimes. Humans make mistakes. You correct, continue, and you log it in if you need to. Aviation is built on the idea that nothing should ever surprise you. And for most of my career, that was true. I have flown in every condition that makes passengers grip armrest and swear off flying forever. Severe turbulence, lightning crawling across the windshield, winds strong enough that landing felt like setting the airplane down sideways. And none of that stuck with me. None of that even made me question the job. What stuck were the flights where nothing went wrong. Clear weather, normal traffic, nominal systems. Those are the ones that bother me now. There's a confidence that comes with airline flying that's hard to explain unless you've been there. You're not wondering what's around you. Between GPS, inertial systems, radar, traffic displays, and constant communication with air traffic control, there shouldn't be anything you don't know about in the sky around you. The phrase we use is situational awareness. And modern cockpits are designed to make it nearly impossible to lose. You know where you are, who's above you, who's below you, who's crossing 10 miles ahead, and who will be there in 5 minutes. The margins are tight, but they're intentional. That's why when something doesn't line up, it's unsettling in a way turbulence never is. Turbulence is chaotic, but it follows rules. Wind shear, thermal activity, mountain waves, you can point to causes. You can explain it and brief it. You can predict it. What I'm talking about are moments when the sky behaves like it skipped a step. I didn't notice it at first. Most pilots wouldn't. The first few times it was easy to write off as clerical noise. A bad timestamp, a delayed data entry, somebody on the ground clicking the wrong field in a system that feeds a dozen others. Aviation runs on layers of software stitched together over decades, and small errors happen. But small errors don't repeat cleanly. They don't show up across independent systems that aren't supposed to talk to each other. They don't persist after you double check them. And they definitely don't leave you with the feeling that something arrived before it should have. There's an unspoken rule in this job. You don't chase ghosts. If you start treating every irregularity as something ominous, you'll burn out fast. You stick to what you can verify. You fly the airplane. You let maintenance worry about hardware, and dispatch worry about paperwork. Still, there are things pilots talk about quietly, usually off the record. Things that don't fit into reports cleanly. Routes that feel short on certain days. Calls that don't quite sound right until later. Visuals that vanish the moment you look away. Nobody frames these as stories. They're anecdotes, delivered flatly, usually followed by a shrug. Aviation attracts practical people. We don't lean into mystery. And that's why it took me years to accept that what I was seeing wasn't random. It wasn't weather or fatigue, and it wasn't coincidence. The sky behaves the way it does because we expect it to. Because we assume distance is fixed, time is linear, and airspace is consistent. Almost all of the time, those assumptions hold. Almost. The flights I'm about to describe didn't involve emergencies. No maydays or screaming alarms or heroic landings. They were ordinary flights that ended with data that didn't belong to them. And once you notice that kind of thing, it becomes harder to ignore the days when the sky feels just a little too efficient, a little too close. Alright, well, let's get to incident 1. The suitcase that arrived first. This one didn't feel important at the time. If anything, it felt like a mild inconvenience wrapped in somebody else's problem. We were already taxiing in when the cabin crew called up to the cockpit to let us know a passenger had a question about their bag. That happens on almost every flight. People worry their luggage didn't make it. They misread the carousel numbers. They assume the worst before the aircraft doors even open. We told the lead flight attendant to have the passenger check with baggage services at the terminal. Standard response. We shut down, ran our checklist, and opened the door. Nothing unusual. The flight itself had been unremarkable. Short hop with clear weather and light load. Smooth ride the whole way down. We'd been a few minutes early on arrival, which always feels like a small victory, even though it doesn't actually change anything. I was finishing up paperwork when the same flight attendant came back up front. She said the passenger was insisting that their bag was already waiting for them. I remember half smiling and saying something like that'd be a first without really thinking about it. She didn't laugh. She said the passenger had a photo. That got my attention. I followed her off the aircraft and down into the jet bridge where the passenger was standing with their phone out. Middle-aged guy. Calm, not angry or excited, just confused. He showed me a photo of his suitcase sitting by itself near the carousel. It was unmistakably his. Distinctive color, scuffed corner, a ribbon tied to the handle. The timestamp on the photo showed it'd been taken 10 minutes earlier. At that point, I assumed it was a reused bag photo from a previous trip. People do that sometimes. They try to prove a point by recycling evidence. I don't know, it's strange. And then he showed me the baggage claim notification. His bag had been scanned into the destination system before we landed. That's the part that still sticks with me. Airplane baggage handling is messy, but it's not magical. A bag doesn't exist in the arrival system until it's physically offloaded, scanned, and inducted onto a belt. Every step is logged automatically. It's not dependent on one person remembering to click a button. I told him to head to baggage services and said I'd check with ground operations. Again, nothing dramatic, just due diligence. By the time I got back to the cockpit, the first officer had already heard about it from the ramp crew, and they were just as confused. We pulled up the timeline. Departure scan, correct. Bag loaded on our aircraft at the origin. Weight and balance reflected it. Cargo door sealed. Arrival scan, time-stamped 7 minutes before touchdown. I checked the flight log to make sure it wasn't misreading something. The aircraft's on-block time was recorded properly. The arrival scan predated it cleanly. Not by seconds, by minutes. Ground ops assumed it was a system sync issue. That's the phrase they used. A delay between systems updating or a cached entry being released early. Sounded reasonable enough. These systems are old, layered and patched, sometimes temperamental. Still, it bothered me. I asked if any other bags from our flight had similar timestamps. They didn't. Just the one. Maintenance checked the cargo door seals as a formality, and everything was normal. Dispatch reviewed the load sheet. Normal. The bag tag number matched the passenger. No duplication or misroute. Eventually, the explanation settled on data irregularity, which is airline shorthand for "we don't know." The passenger got his bag, and it was intact. No damage or missing things. He thanked us and left. And that should have been the end of it. But later that night, after we'd flown another leg and parked for the evening, the first officer brought it up again. He asked if I'd ever seen anything like that before. I said no. He said neither had he. What made it worse wasn't the anomaly itself. It was how clean it was, No errors or system meltdown, It was like one object behaving as if distance didn't apply to it. Well, a few weeks later, something similar happened on a different route. Different aircraft and crew and airport. Same result. A bag scanned into the arrival system early. This time, the difference was that someone noticed before the aircraft even landed. Ground ops flagged it while we were still on descent. They assumed the bag had been misloaded onto an earlier flight. It hadn't. The tag trace showed it loaded onto our aircraft at the origin. The ramp cameras confirmed it. The bag never left the plane. Yet there it was, logged as having arrived. Again, no other bags showed the same behavior. Again, the explanation was quietly closed as a system error. Well, I started asking around, casually, over coffee during layovers, in the way pilots talk when they're not writing anything down. A cargo captain told me he'd seen a pallet register as delivered while they were still over the ocean. He'd laughed it off at the time. Another pilot mentioned a wheelchair that appeared at the gate before the aircraft reached the stand. He said he assumed it was a coincidence until he realized the gate hadn't been assigned yet. None of these incidents were alarming on their own. Nobody filed safety reports or escalated them. They didn't affect operations. But they shared the same shape. An object arriving before its carrier. At first, I told myself I was looking for patterns that weren't there. That's human nature. Once you notice something odd, you start seeing it everywhere. But I kept quiet records just for myself. And the more I looked, the more strange things got. Incident 2. The missing minutes. Now, the next one didn't involve baggage or ground systems. It involved us. It was a medium-length domestic leg, long enough to settle into cruise, but short enough that you're paying attention to the clock. Those flights live and die on timing. Fuel planning, descent profiles, crew duty limits, everything is built around predictable minutes. Weather was clear from departure to destination. Not mostly clear, but clear. No convective activity. No jet stream anomalies worth mentioning. No altitude changes requested. It was one of those days where flying feels almost automated. We leveled off early and settled into cruise. Engines were stable. Fuel flow was exactly where it should be. Ground speed was normal for the altitude and wind component we had. Nothing unusual. About halfway through the leg, air traffic control asked us to confirm our position. That's not unheard of, but it's a little uncommon. Normally, they already know. Radar, ADS-B, transponder returns. Our position is being tracked constantly. I read back our coordinates. There was a pause on the frequency. Then ATC asked us to say it again. I did, and there was another pause. They came back and asked if we could confirm our ground speed. I glanced down, read it off, and looked at the first officer. He shrugged. Everything looked fine. ATC acknowledged and told us to continue as cleared. And that was it. Now, if that had been the end of it, I wouldn't be telling this story. A few minutes later, we were handed off to the next sector much earlier than expected. The first officer noticed it at the same time I did. He tapped the navigation display and asked if I thought the wind data had updated incorrectly. We cross-checked and it hadn't. The forecast and actuals were aligned. I pulled up the flight plan timing. According to the numbers, we were ahead. According to the engines, we weren't. According to the ground speed, we weren't. According to the clock, we were. It didn't add up. Well, the rest of the flight went normally. Descent, approach, landing, all standard. It wasn't until later, after shutdown, that things started to bother me. I pulled the post-flight data out of habit more than concern. Engine trends were clean. Fuel burn was exactly where it should have been. No spikes or anomalies. And then I looked at the recorded timestamps. The flight data recorder showed a gap. The aircraft transitioned between two logged waypoints faster than the distance between them should have allowed. The timestamps were clean, sequential, no errors. It was as if the airplane had covered a stretch of airspace without spending the expected amount of time inside it. I showed it to the first officer. He frowned, recalculated it manually, and came to the same conclusion. We went through every reasonable explanation. There's no tailwind, no altitude deviation, instrument error, cross-checked across independent systems. GPS glitch, well, possible, but unlikely given the consistency across multiple sensors. Eventually, we landed on the same conclusion aviation always does when something doesn't affect safety. Log it and move on. So we did. The next time it happened was 3 months later. Different route and aircraft, similar length. Same result. This time, ATC noticed again. They asked us to slow down. That got my attention. You don't get asked to slow down in cruise unless spacing is off. We reduced speed slightly, well within normal limits. A few minutes later, they asked us to slow again. We complied. According to them, we were closing on traffic ahead much faster than expected. According to our displays, we weren't. There was no visual traffic, nothing on the scope. After landing, I requested a copy of the ATC timing data through normal channels. They took a while. By the time it came back, I'd almost forgotten about it. The timestamps didn't match ours. Their system showed us passing through controlled airspace earlier than our onboard systems indicated. I stopped talking about it openly after that. Not because anybody told me to stop, but because I recognized the look people gave me when I brought it up. Aviation doesn't reward curiosity unless it improves safety or efficiency. Everything else is noise. Still, I started paying closer attention. Some flights felt longer than scheduled. Some felt shorter. Most felt normal. The ones that didn't weren't tied to weather or traffic or aircraft type. There was no consistent pattern I could point to. No particular altitude or latitude that explained it. Just stretches of sky that seemed to let you through faster than they should. I didn't feel anything during those moments. No physical sensation or visual distortion. no sound. If you weren't watching the numbers, you'd never know anything had happened. That's the part that bothers me. If something dangerous is happening, you expect warning signs, alarms, vibration. This didn't feel dangerous. It felt efficient. Like the sky had decided we didn't need to spend as much time there. After the third occurrence, I stopped assuming it was a coincidence. After the fourth, I stopped telling myself it was fatigue. After the fifth, I started wondering what would happen if we stayed inside one of those compressed stretches longer than usual. So far, we never have. Not deliberately, anyway. And that's probably for the best. Incident 3. This one took time to understand. At the moment it happened, there was nothing about it that felt wrong. It sounded exactly like a pilot doing his job. We were in cruise, mid-morning, clear skies, international airspace, but well within normal commercial corridors. The radios were busy in the way they usually are. Position reports, altitude confirmations, handoffs between sectors. Nothing stood out. And then a call came in on our frequency. It was brief and professional. The voice identified an aircraft by call sign and tail number, stated their position, altitude, and heading, and requested confirmation of traffic in the area. Standard stuff. I glanced at the traffic display. Nothing showed nearby. Before I could respond, ATC came back and acknowledged the call. They issued a routine advisory and cleared the aircraft to continue on course. The exchange was clean, textbook phraseology, nothing improvised. The voice sounded calm. Male, middle-aged, if I had to guess. Slight accent, hard to place but not unusual. Pilots fly internationally all the time. I remember thinking briefly that his radio sounded a little older. Not bad, just flatter, less processed. But that could have been anything. Radio quality varies. We never saw the aircraft. Not visually. Not on TCAS. Not on radar. That, too, isn't unheard of. Sometimes traffic is below radar coverage, or shielded by terrain, or filtered out momentarily. It happens. A few minutes later, the aircraft called again. Same voice and calm tone, same professional cadence. They thanked ATC and reported clear of the area. Then the frequency moved on. The rest of the flight was uneventful. We landed, parked, and went about our day. It wasn't until that evening, during a layover, that the first officer brought it up. He asked if I'd noticed that the call sign sounded unfamiliar. I shrugged. Call signs change. Charter flights, cargo ops, repositioning legs, you hear all kinds of identifiers. He said he'd tried to look it up out of curiosity. It wasn't in the system. That's unusual, but not unheard of. Databases lag. Temporary call signs exist. Military flights sometimes don't populate civilian systems correctly. By the time he showed me what he found, my stomach dropped. The aircraft wasn't missing from the database. It had been removed from it decades ago. The tail number belonged to an aircraft that disappeared over open water more than 50 years ago. No distress call or debris field, no confirmed crash site. It was one of those cases aviation historians argue about. Fuel exhaustion versus mechanical failure versus weather versus something else. The official record listed it just as lost. The call sign had been retired shortly after. No other aircraft had used it since. The hair on my arms stood up when I read that. We pulled the cockpit voice recording from our flight, and the transmission was there, clear as day. We played it back multiple times. The voice hadn't changed, no distortion, no background noise that didn't belong. No indication it was anything other than a normal radio call. ATC confirmed they'd heard it too. When we asked if they'd pulled the aircraft's radar track, The answer came back short and final. There was no radar track, no primary return or secondary transponder. Nothing. Just a voice. Someone suggested it might have been a replay, an old transmission bleeding through, a recording accidentally rebroadcast. That explanation didn't hold. It wasn't a tape. It was interactive. The internal discussion stopped there. Not because anyone ordered it to stop, but because nobody wanted to push it further. There are moments in aviation where you realize you're brushing up against something that doesn't have a checklist. We were quietly advised not to file anything formal beyond noting unidentified transmission. That phrase covers a lot. The recording was archived, and life went on. I told myself it was a coincidence layered on top of another coincidence, that the call sign match was unfortunate, but meaningless, that someone somewhere had reused an old identifier without updating a database. Except that didn't explain the tail number, or the fact that the aircraft described its position in a way that placed it exactly where the missing plane would have been, given its last known heading, adjusted for modern routing. That detail came out later, during an off-the-report conversation with someone who'd looked deeper than they were supposed to. The next time I heard that call sign, it wasn't on one of my flights. It was over coffee, in a crew room halfway across the world. Another pilot mentioned it casually. Said he'd heard a strange transmission once that didn't match anything on his displays. Said the voice sounded old-fashioned, whatever that means. When I asked him what the call sign was, he hesitated. Then he told me. And it was the same one, same number. He hadn't looked it up because he hadn't wanted to. Neither of us said anything else after that. There are ghosts people talk about in aviation. Phantom airports, runways that appear in fog, lights that don't belong to anything. Most of those stories get exaggerated with retelling. This one does not need embellishment. Incident 4. The Blue Orbs. Now, by the time this happened, I'd stopped assuming that every strange event would announce itself as strange. Most of the things that stayed with me didn't arrive with alarms or urgency. They showed up quietly, like something that expected to be seen eventually. This was a night flight over open water. Long haul, high altitude. The kind of route where there's nothing to look at outside except stars and the faint reflection of the cockpit on the glass. These flights are monotonous in a way that actually sharpens your awareness for me. There's less visual clutter, fewer radio calls, fewer distractions. You notice small things. The first officer was the one who saw it first. He didn't react right away. He leaned forward slightly, adjusted his seat, and looked again before saying anything. That's a habit most pilots develop early. Confirm with your own eyes before you bring someone else in. After a few seconds, he said, "Did you see that off the left side?" I followed his gaze. At first, I assumed it was a reflection. That's almost always the answer. Internal lighting, instrument glow, a star lined up just wrong. I shifted my head and changed angles. The light didn't move. It was blue, not white blue or strobe blue, a deep, saturated blue, like a welding arc seen from a distance. It sat slightly below our altitude, a few miles off our left wing, steady and constant. Then a second one appeared, then a third. They didn't pop into existence, they faded in smoothly, as if they'd been there the whole time and we'd only just noticed them. They weren't flashing or rotating. They were leaving contrails or reflections. They just sat there matching our speed. And that's when the first officer quietly said, "Those aren't stars." I checked TCAS. Nothing. No traffic or altitude returns or warnings. I checked the weather radar next. Completely clear. Well, we altered speed slightly. Not enough to be operationally significant. Just enough to see if relative position would change. It didn't. The lights adjusted with us. Not aggressively or suddenly, just enough to maintain spacing. And that was the moment the cabin got real quiet. Neither of us reached for the radio right away, not because we were afraid to, but because we didn't yet know what we'd be reporting. Pilots don't call ATC to say, there's something weird. You need specifics. Altitude, bearing, distance, behavior. I keyed the mic and asked ATC if they had any traffic near our position. They didn't. I asked again, more specifically, giving relative bearing and altitude. Negative traffic. I asked if any military activity was scheduled in the area. None. We watched the lights for several minutes. They didn't approach or retreat. They didn't cross in front of us or fall behind. They behaved like formation traffic. Except there was no aircraft. Eventually, one of them moved. It didn't accelerate away. It didn't climb or descend in a way that matched aircraft performance. It simply slid laterally, arcing around our nose and repositioning itself on the right side of the aircraft. The movement was smooth, and that's when I felt real unease. Because I'd heard about this before. Not in rumors, not online. In official briefings and incident summaries that never quite make the headlines. Commercial pilots in Europe have reported blue lights pacing aircraft at cruise altitude. Navy pilots off the US East Coast have described spherical objects that glow blue or white and maneuver without visible propulsion. FAA safety reports include entries describing unidentified luminous objects maintaining formation for extended periods before vanishing. There was a widely reported case years ago involving pilots over the Pacific who described blue orbs orbiting their aircraft at altitude. Another involved airline crews over the Middle East seeing similar lights during night operations, recorded by multiple cockpit crews independently. Those reports are always written carefully. No speculations, just behavior. And that's exactly what we were seeing. The orbs weren't affected by our wake. They didn't drift when we altered heading slightly. They weren't buffeted by air currents. They behaved like they were in their own environment, intersecting ours temporarily. Well, after about 10 minutes, ATC called us. They hadn't seen anything on radar, but another aircraft behind us had reported unusual blue lights in the same general area. That did something to my sense of scale. This wasn't isolated to us. We weren't being singled out. We were passing through something other crews had encountered too. The lights didn't vanish all at once. One dimmed and faded. Another followed a minute later. The last lingered the longest, holding position off the right wing before sliding backward and disappearing into the dark. No acceleration or flare, just gone. The rest of the flight was quiet. After landing, we wrote it up the only way you can write something like that up. Precise and minimal. Behavioral. No adjectives that didn't belong. 3 blue luminous objects observed at cruise altitude. Maintained relative position. No TCAS return, no radar contact. No turbulence or system anomalies. That's it. Later during the layover, a different crew approached us quietly. They asked if we'd seen anything unusual on the route. They didn't need to explain further. They had. And it was the same color and behavior and quiet departure. Now, nobody suggested aliens. Nobody joked. Nobody speculated. That's not how pilots talk about things that make them very uncomfortable. We talked about what happened, then we moved on. But from that point forward, whenever I flew at night over open water, I found myself scanning the dark a little more carefully. Incident 5, the red sky. This was the first time the sky stopped behaving like sky. Not visually strange in a subtle way or ambiguous. Not something you could rationalize if you stared at it long enough. It was very wrong. Now, this was a night flight over continental airspace, well within controlled routing, nothing remote or exotic. Weather briefings were clean across the board. No convective activity, no high cloud tops, no anomalies. The first half of the flight was uneventful enough that neither of us would have remembered it otherwise. The first sign came from the horizon. At first glance, it looked like distant weather illuminated by city glow. That happens sometimes. Storm systems can reflect sodium vapor lights and create strange colors at night. But this wasn't reflected light. The sky ahead of us, it was red, not streaked, not layered or moving. A deep, uniform red filled the entire forward view, from left to right, from below the nose to well above our altitude. It didn't brighten gradually, it was simply there, like a wall we hadn't noticed until we were close enough to see it. I checked the weather radar immediately. Clear. I adjusted the tilt, increased gain, switched modes. Still clear. The first officer leaned forward, eyes fixed on the windshield. He didn't say anything at first. The red didn't get closer the way weather does. It didn't resolve into clouds or bands. Didn't change shape. It waited. And then the turbulence hit. Not chop or gradual build. The autopilot disconnected hard, and the aircraft lurched as if it struck resistance. Wasn't air pressure, it was something denser. The controls responded normally, but the feedback felt very wrong, like flying through a medium that wasn't uniform. And outside, the red intensified. And then things started to move inside it. These were not vague shapes. These were enormous. The first one became visible as a silhouette against the red, then resolved enough that scale became impossible to ignore. It was massive, longer than our entire wingspan, moving slowly across our forward field of view. It wasn't flying the way aircraft fly, it was swimming through the red, its body undulating as if the sky itself had depth. Then another appeared. Then another. They were huge. Not large animal huge, continental shelf huge. The kind of size you associate with deep ocean creatures. Things that only make sense where pressure and darkness hide scale. One passed close enough that I could see structure. There was a head. There were wings. More shapes followed, some vertical, rising through the red as if ascending from below. Others horizontal, gliding past at different depths. One moved beneath us, and the aircraft jolted again, like we crossed a wake. The first officer said something then. Disbelief? ATC called us. They asked if we were experiencing turbulence. I answered yes and requested an immediate deviation. They approved it instantly. The turbulence intensified again. The aircraft shuddered as another massive shape passed close enough that I could see it. One of the creatures turned, and I don't want to describe it. I committed to a full reversal. Not a standard deviation or gradual turn. I turned the aircraft back the way we came. As the turn completed, the red began to collapse. It didn't fade, it was like it folded. The sky ahead compressed inward, forming a circular distortion, darker at the edges, lighter in the center. And then we crossed a boundary. The sky snapped back to normal. Black, empty stars. The turbulence stopped instantly. Autopilot re-engaged without complaint. All systems stabilized. No warnings or residual effects. It was like it hadn't happened. ATC called again, asking us to confirm heading and intentions. I told them we were returning to our departure airport due to unforeseen severe turbulence. That was true. The landing was uneventful. Maintenance found nothing wrong with the aircraft, no damage or sensor faults. The flight data showed sharp turbulence events, and it showed nothing else. Of course it didn't. Later, in a quiet room, the first officer asked the only question that mattered. What do you think would have happened if we kept going? I didn't answer. Now, this last incident is very hard to explain, not because it was frightening exactly, but because it was ridiculous. There was no red sky or lights, no voices on the radio. It was just weather. At least that's what it was supposed to be. We were on descent when the turbulence started. Not unusual at that altitude. Little rougher than forecast, but nothing that justified concern at first. Then it intensified rapidly. Sharp jolts, sudden drops, impacts against the fuselage loud enough to be heard over the engines. It sounded like hail. That's what I told the cabin crew. Secure the cabin, expect a rough ride, standard procedures. We checked weather radar. Nothing. No cells or returns or precipitation. And then something struck the windshield hard enough that both of us flinched. Another hit followed, then several more. Rapid, uneven impacts, like we were flying through a dense shower of debris. The aircraft shook violently. The turbulence wasn't smooth or patterned. It felt chaotic, as if objects were striking us from multiple directions. We slowed. We descended faster than planned. ATC asked if we needed assistance. I told them we were encountering severe turbulence and possible hail. That was the closest word available. By the time we broke out into clear air, the impact stopped as abruptly as they'd begun. The rest of the descent was smooth. The landing was uneventful, though the aircraft did need inspection before the next leg. That didn't surprise anyone. Hail can do serious damage even when radar misses it. What surprised everyone was what maintenance found. There were small, colorful fragments smeared along the leading edges of the wings, in gaps near control surfaces, embedded in places hailstones shouldn't reach. At first, one of the mechanics thought it was insulation or paint transfer from ground equipment. And then he picked one up, and it was sticky. Another one was intact enough to identify. A jelly bean. Not melted or burned, just cracked and flattened from impact. They found hundreds of them. Different colors: red, yellow, green, purple. Some stuck to the wing like residue. Others lodged in seams and crevices. A few had bounced hard enough to leave faint dye streaks in the paint. Nobody said anything for a long moment. Eventually, someone asked if a catering cart had exploded mid-air. It hadn't. Someone else suggested cargo contamination. Yeah, there was no cargo like that on board. Weather logs were checked. No reports of hail. No storms anywhere near our route. No explanation for why candy would be falling from the sky. The official report listed unknown foreign object debris associated with severe turbulence. The jelly beans were cleaned off and disposed of. I think I even saw a couple of our guys eating them. No samples were kept, as far as I know. Of all the things I have seen flying, that's the one people laugh about when they hear it. Even other pilots. Especially other pilots, and I don't blame them. But every time I see a maintenance crew inspecting wings after turbulence now, I think about how easy it is for something absurd to slip through the cracks of explanation. There was no monsters or lights or warnings. Just a hell of a lot of candy falling from an empty sky. Well, I still fly. That's usually the first question people ask when they hear some version of these stories. They expect hesitation or a change in tone, or an admission that something broke permanently in my brain after all this. It didn't, as far as I know. I still trust the airplane. I still trust the systems. I trust the people I fly with. Aviation works because it is built on discipline, repetition, and the refusal to panic when something unexpected happens. None of what I've described took that away from me. What it changed was how I think about the sky. Pilots are trained to believe that airspace is consistent, that distance in physics behaves the same everywhere, that time passes at the same rate regardless of where you are, as long as your clocks agree. We treat the sky like a three-dimensional map you can fold neatly into numbers. And most of the time that model works. But not always. Over the years, I've come to accept that there are pockets of airspace that don't behave the way the rest of it does. Places where objects arrive early, where time compresses, where voices come from aircraft that never landed, where lights pace you without showing up on anything that's supposed to see them, where entire sections of sky change character without warning. None of this happens often. That's important to understand. If it did, aviation wouldn't function. Flights wouldn't arrive. Systems would fail constantly, and people wouldn't shrug these things off and keep going. The rarity is what allows it to exist unnoticed. Most pilots go their entire careers without encountering anything like what I've described. Many who do encounter it will dismiss it, forget it, or decide it isn't worth talking about. This job doesn't encourage philosophical detours. We don't get paid to wonder. Still, there are quiet adjustments people make. Routes some crews don't like. Headings they avoid if they don't have to take them. Sections of sky that feel off on certain nights for reasons no one writes down. Now, none of this is official. None of it shows up in manuals. It doesn't need to. Aviation is full of unspoken rules. No, I don't think the sky is hostile. That's the part people get wrong when they hear stories like this. They jump straight to fear or invasion or intent. What I've seen doesn't feel aggressive exactly. Maybe it's indifferent. Like we're passing through systems that weren't designed with us in mind. The red sky didn't chase us. The lights didn't intercept us. The creatures didn't react beyond noticing that we were there. Even the jelly beans, as absurd as that sounds, didn't feel targeted. They just happened. I don't know if that makes it better or worse, because it suggests that whatever else exists up there isn't concerned with us one way or the other. It's like we're incidental. Most days we move through the sky unnoticed. Some days we brush up against something larger. Now, I don't tell passengers about any of this. I don't hint at it. I know a lot of people are afraid of flying. People deserve a calm flight. They deserve confidence. They deserve to believe that the sky behaves the same today as it did yesterday. And most of the time it does. If there's any advice buried in all this, it isn't about fear. It's about humility. The world is bigger than our systems. The sky is older than our maps. Just because we've learned how to move through it efficiently does not mean we understand it. So you're the detective, huh? Didn't think you'd actually show. Not that I blame you. This isn't exactly prime real estate for an investigation. Ash Pines Mall, middle of nowhere. Nothing but cracked pavement, dead storefronts, and a flickering open late sign that hasn't been true for years. Still, I get it. Kids go missing, rumors start flying, and eventually someone higher up decides it's time to stop ignoring the place. Took long enough. Most people just scroll past the videos, laugh, and move on. But you didn't. Alright then. I wasn't sure about this. Talking to a cop, a detective, whatever, never sits right with me. But people are getting hurt, and it's tied to this place. I don't care what they call it online, a challenge, a game, some urban legend. It is real enough to me. And if someone's finally listening, maybe it's time I said something. I guess I should start at the beginning. My name is Sam, and I'm the night security guard here at Ash Pines. I've been working this job for almost 4 years now. The title makes it sound more official than it is. Really, I just walk laps through an empty building for 8 hours straight, make sure nobody breaks anything or dies in the stairwells. That's the job. I didn't grow up thinking this was where I'd end up. Used to be a forklift operator out near Weller Creek, back when the lumber yard was still open. Got laid off when they downsized, and after that it was just one short-term gig after another. Packing boxes, unloading trucks, hard work, but not the kind that really goes anywhere. Then one day, I saw an ad online. Night watchman needed. No experience required. That was it. No fancy company logo, just a number to call and an address that looked like it hadn't been updated since the early 2000s. Figured it was a scam or some kind of dead-end gig. But I didn't have better options. So I drove out and knocked on the side door like the ad said. Guy named Carl let me in. He ran security at the time. Older guy. Looked like he'd been doing this since the 80s. He barely looked at my resume. Just asked if I had a reliable ride and could stay awake past midnight. I said sure. He gave me a ring of keys, pointed to the break room, and that was that. Anyway, I have been working the night shift here since April. Wasn't supposed to be permanent. Picked it up to help cover bills while prices kept going up. Groceries, gas, Everything seemed more expensive this year. My 2 kids were already reminding me that Christmas was coming, and I didn't want to be the dad who shrugged when they asked for bikes. So I took the hours. Nights pay a little bit more. Nobody else wanted them. And it made sense at the time. The mall's mostly dead now. Has been for years. Most of the good stores left around 2017, and the ones that stayed just never got the hint. Somehow there's still a Radio Shack down by the East Wing. Nobody knows how it's open. Even the guy who works there doesn't seem sure. The food court's half shut, and the Chinese place only makes food if you call ahead. The escalator breaks at least twice a week, and nobody bothers fixing it unless somebody complains. Still, the lights come on every night. Somebody has to walk the halls. That someone is me. I work alone most of the time. Jerry handles the day shift, but he clocks out before sundown and doesn't ask questions. I'm fine with that. My only real partner on the job is Benny. He's a 6-year-old mutt with a good nose, a twitchy tail, and more common sense than most people I know. He walks every round with me, tail up, ears forward, always focused. I bought him a little police dog vest online as a joke, but he wears it like it's part of the uniform. People see him and smile, but I've learned to pay attention when he stops smiling. He takes the job seriously, even when I don't. The first time I saw kids playing the mall game was back in July. It was summer break, and they were bored. Most of them didn't even live nearby. They showed up in groups of 3 or 4, usually with a phone out and someone narrating in that fake, scary voice people use online. I caught him on camera slipping through a maintenance door that never locked right. First, I thought they were just filming, one of those abandoned mall walkthroughs. No big deal. But then they started coming back. Different kids, same behavior. moving in the same directions, touching the same doors, sitting in the same chairs and the same food court booths. They weren't just exploring, they were following instructions. I didn't understand it right away, but it felt too coordinated to be random. After a couple weeks, I stopped one of them and asked what the hell they were doing. He was maybe 16. Hoodie, flashlight, sneakers that lit up when he walked. He was very nervous, but actually polite. Said it was just a challenge. Something from TikTok. Said there were rules, and if you followed them, you could win. I asked what this meant. Win what? He said he didn't know. Just that if you followed the rules exactly, something weird might happen. I asked what the rules were. He rattled some off from memory, then showed me the full list on his phone. And that's when I realized this wasn't some prank. There were a lot of them. Numbered. Repeated online by dozens of accounts. Some rules matched. Some didn't. But enough were the same. So I started writing them down. Alright, well, rule 1. It's called the walk. It's how all of them start the game. The kids, I mean. Every version I've come across begins with this step. They show up sometime before 1 a.m. and wait outside one of the main entrances. That could be the east wing, the west wing, or the food court side. Doesn't matter which one, as long as it's one of the 3 front-facing doors. Back entrances, staff hallways, or side exits don't count. They all say the same thing. It has to be a main entrance, and it has to be exactly 1 a.m. The time seems very important to them. I've heard them say that's when the mall switches over, though no one's ever been clear on what that means. Some of them just repeat it like a rule, like something they read online but didn't question. I've looked through the security system logs. Sometimes around that hour, cameras glitch, lights flicker, or systems reset without warning. Doesn't happen every night, but often enough that I started paying attention. According to the kids, the walk is a focus test. The goal is to walk from the entrance straight to the central fountain. No stopping, no detours, and no looking into the store windows. That last part is the main rule. You're allowed to blink, shift your eyes a little, but you're not supposed to turn your head or glance into any display window along the way. If you do, you're out. You fail the walk. They act like it's a game of discipline, something to prove they can follow instructions. A few treat it like a challenge they can post online. Some even rate each other on how well they stayed focused or how far they got before messing up. Most of it's just talk, but I've watched enough of them try it now to know that the rule isn't just about focus. There's a reason you're not supposed to look. The storefront displays, they're not the same at night. I've worked here long enough to notice which stores leave their lights on and what their windows usually look like. After 1 a.m., some of those displays change. Stores that are empty during the day sometimes have mannequins inside at night. Other displays show doors open that should be locked. Sometimes the lights are off, but there's still something standing behind the glass. The mannequins move. It's small movements. They're not jumping out or shifting fast, but they don't stay put. This one night, I walked past the window of an old women's clothing store. It was empty earlier that week. When I came through that hallway after 1 a.m., there were 4 mannequins lined up at the front of the display. By the time I passed again during my next round, one of them had turned to face the glass. And that kind of thing happens often. I've seen a kid stand in front of a display and just freeze there. He didn't say anything, didn't move, just stared into the glass for too long. When I got his attention and asked what he saw, he said the mannequin inside had stepped forward. I checked the camera footage afterward. The feed was frozen during that time. Nothing recorded. Another night, I pulled two kids away from a window near the old jewelry store. They were standing too close. One of them had their phone up, filming. I saw what was behind the glass. A mannequin pressed up with its hand flat against it, like it'd been mid-step when they stopped to look. That display hadn't had anything in it the day before. Sometimes Benny notices them before I do. He'll stop walking and go real quiet. Not growling, not barking. Just still, tail stiff, eyes locked on something I can't see from my angle. Usually it's one of those windows. I don't ask questions when he does that. I just move along and call him after me. He always follows, but he doesn't take his eyes off the display until we're out of that hallway. The kids don't take any of it serious. They talk about points and rounds and beating the walk, like there's some kind of prize at the end. But the way I see it, the walk isn't testing them. It's watching to see who's paying attention. The second someone looks into the glass, they're not just breaking a rule. They're making contact with something inside. If you reach the fountain without looking into the windows, the game says you pass. You're allowed to move on to the next part. If you fail, you're supposed to leave the mall right away and try again another night. Most kids don't take it that seriously. They mess around, get bored, and head out. But I have seen a few who don't. One boy disappeared from the cameras after failing the walk. His friends said he wanted to keep going anyway. We found him in the west stairwell 2 hours later, just sitting on the floor. He wouldn't say anything. He didn't respond when the paramedics arrived. He didn't even blink until they carried him out. Another kid ended up 10 miles away, wandering barefoot into a gas station at dawn. He couldn't explain how he got there. He told the officer he had taken a wrong turn somewhere behind the fountain, and that part of the mall has no back exit. So that's rule 1. Walk from the entrance to the fountain at exactly 1 a.m. Don't stop, don't speak, and don't look into the windows. Rule 2. Rule 2 is called the Echo Challenge. This step comes right after the kids finish Rule 1. If they reach the central fountain without breaking the first rule, the game tells them to head to the south wing. That hallway is on the far side of the mall, past the old pet store and the closed vitamin shop. It leads toward the freight elevator and what used to be the main employee service hallway when the mall was fully staffed. Once the player reaches the middle of that hallway, they're supposed to clap 1 time. Just once. The kids treat it like a signal for the next level. Some of them say it wakes up the mall for the next step. Others say it triggers the next challenge. There's no real explanation. They just repeat what they hear online. The rule says that if the clap comes back with a clean echo, same timing, same tone, then they pass and can move to Rule 3. If the echo takes too long or comes back sounding different, then they're supposed to stop immediately and leave the mall before 1:10 a.m. That part gets ignored a lot. The problem is that the south wing reacts to sound at night. I don't know the reason, and I've never seen a person down there after hours, but I have heard things move around in that wing, like heavy items dragging on the floor. I hear it during rounds sometimes. It's not every night, but when it happens, it always lines up with the same time, between 1:04 a.m. and 1:12 a.m. Benny refuses to go near that hallway no matter what time it is. He'll walk with me anywhere else in this mall, but not there. The south wing, it's also older than the rest of the building. When the mall was first designed, that hallway was supposed to connect to a second expansion that never happened. Construction began in the early 2000s, but there was a fire during the build-out. Wasn't publicized much, but a few employees working overnight were killed. The official story blamed faulty wiring, and cleanup started right away. They kept the building for a little while after that, but the project was shut down not long after, unofficially. A bigger issue is the backroom doors in that area. The mall has several service corridors that run behind the storefronts. Most of them are locked, but the ones in the south wing have been opening on their own. I found them cracked open on nights when I know I checked them earlier. And whenever this happens, it's always around the same time, right after a group of teens try to play the mall game. And this brings us to the case you asked about earlier. The kid they found in the water tank on the roof. Yeah, that was Caleb Meyer. 14 years old. Came in with his older brother and 2 friends on August 19th. I wasn't near the entrances at the time, but I saw all of them on the security footage later, before handing the tapes to the police. They entered through the food court doors at 12:56 a.m. Caleb was wearing a red hoodie, and the brother had a backpack. They stopped at the fountain like the game tells them to. It was around 1:03 a.m. when they got there. They talked for a bit, and then Caleb and his brother started walking toward the south wing. The other 2 stayed behind. That's not unusual. Sometimes kids split up when they want to film different parts of the challenge. The cameras recorded them entering the hallway at 1:06 a.m. At 1:08 a.m., the footage shows only the brother coming back. He turned around, walked a few steps backward, said something out of view, and then came back alone. He rejoined the others, and they all left the mall by 1:11 a.m. They didn't report Caleb missing until the next morning when he didn't come home. When officers questioned the brother, he said they both clapped just like the rules said. His echo came back right away, but Caleb's didn't. The brother described it as slow and uneven. He said it sounded like it bounced off a room that wasn't supposed to be there. He told Caleb they should head back, but Caleb said he wanted to check something real quick. He walked deeper into the hallway, and the brother left him there. 9 days later, maintenance workers noticed complaints from the shop owners about the tap water. When they checked the rooftop tank, they found Caleb inside, dead. The tank hatch was closed. The maintenance staff had to cut the lock to open it. The ladder inside the tank wasn't extended, and the access door leading to the roof didn't show signs of forced entry. He didn't have any broken bones, and there weren't marks that suggested he'd been in a fight. But there was an open wound on his abdomen that the coroner couldn't explain. And his liver was missing. His clothes were folded beside the tank, as if he'd taken his time arranging them. His shoes and socks were placed neatly next to the pile, lined up instead of kicked off. They didn't find his phone or his wallet. All I can tell you is that the hallway he walked into has a backroom door that connects to the service corridors. That door was found open that same night. I saw it myself. I used my own key to lock it again. I think Caleb made the mistake of hearing the wrong echo and staying anyway. Whatever answered him wasn't supposed to. And that's all I know about Rule 2 in that particular case, Detective. But there's 2 more rules that you should know about. Rule 3 is called Ride the Elevator. This is the step where things usually go wrong. If a kid makes it through the first 2 parts, the walk and the echo, then the next move is to go to the central elevator, not the service lift in the back, not the one near the food court. It has to be the main one in the middle of the mall, right next to the fountain. It's old, the panel inside scratched up. The lighting above it is dim, and sometimes the floor indicators don't light up at all. Still works though. Maintenance checks it once a month, and I've ridden it hundreds of times. Normally, it takes you to 3 places: the ground floor, the second floor, and the underground parking garage. That underground level is labeled C1 for Car Park 1. That's the only underground level the mall was supposed to have, at least officially. According to the kids who play the mall game, that elevator behaves very differently after 1 a.m. But only if you followed the first 2 steps exactly. If you mess one of them up, it just works like normal. But if you do everything right, they say the elevator will flicker when you press C1. Sometimes the button flashes twice. Sometimes it lights up, then shuts off, then lights up again. They call that the signal, like a confirmation that the game is still going. The goal is to ride the elevator all the way down to the parking garage. They say the ride takes longer than it should. The distance from the main floor to C1 is only 1 level, maybe 10 or 15 seconds, but the kids report staying inside for up to a full minute. Some say it feels longer than that. A few have filmed themselves standing inside, waiting, just to prove how long it takes. The elevator has no music, just that mechanical hum. They usually record their faces in the ceiling corner, using their phone cameras to catch their own expressions. I've seen those videos. Most get deleted or flagged. The ones that stay up just show them waiting. The footage usually ends when the doors open. They expect something scary, like a spooky parking garage. Some lights flickering, maybe something far away in the dark. That's what they come in hoping for. Something thrilling. Something that gives them a good reaction clip. But that's not what this step is. When the elevator reaches the bottom, it's not always C1 anymore. I've been in that elevator during the day. I've ridden it to check reports, test the panel, or take deliveries to the lower garage. During normal hours, the only options on the panel are G, 2, and C1. That's it. No surprises, nothing weird. But after 1 a.m., and only on certain nights, more buttons appear. I've seen them myself. Buttons labeled 01, 02, and 03. I've asked maintenance about it, and they say those levels don't exist. The elevator system isn't coded for more than 1 basement level. No blueprints include a 2nd or 3rd subfloor. Nothing in the electrical room shows power routed that far down. But I have seen those buttons with my own eyes, and so have the kids. The stories vary depending on who you ask. Some say pressing 01 takes you to an old, forgotten part of the mall that was buried when they redid the foundation. Others say pressing 02 or 03 brings you to something worse. A few online say that's the part where you go to hell, but most just call it the next step in the challenge. I've never pressed those buttons. I won't, but I've talked to people who did, at least the ones who came back. A couple of teens I stopped one morning said they made it all the way to level 01. They said the elevator opened to a hallway with yellow wallpaper and water up to their ankles. They didn't go far in. One of them said it felt like something horrible was just around the corner. A feeling they couldn't explain that eventually forced them to wade back to the still open elevator. I've heard the reports. The missing kids. I think Rule 3 is when most of them disappear or go missing. They step into that elevator, press a button, and the doors open to something they weren't ready for. After that, there's no camera footage. The elevator returns empty, sometimes after a delay. The button panel is back to normal when I check it. I have had to call more than one set of parents. I've looked through the footage. There's no struggle, No signs of panic. No alarms go off. They just ride the elevator down, the doors open, and that's it. They're gone. I don't know if it takes them to hell. I don't know if I believe in all that. But I do think it takes them somewhere they weren't supposed to go. Somewhere beneath a mall that isn't mapped, built, or maintained by anyone still working here. I think those extra floors are part of the same system the back rooms are connected to. The ones that open up when the south wing is active. Whatever's down there, it isn't empty. There's one more rule. Rule 4. I call it follow the dog, and it's the only rule that can actually save someone. Before I explain it, I need to be direct with you, because you're a detective, and you asked for the truth. There's something inside this mall. It lives in the back rooms, the service tunnels, sealed hallways, and unmapped basement levels that shouldn't exist. It's the reason the displays shift. It's the reason the south wing acts the way it does. It's the reason the elevator goes places it shouldn't. And it follows the kids. Not all the time. Not every night. But when they get too far into the game, when they ignore warnings, stay past the time limit, or press the wrong button, that thing finds them. It moves quietly, and it's patient. When it gets close, the air changes in a way people don't notice at first. You feel pressure, or maybe just the sense that something is standing too close. Kids think it's nerves. It's not. The autopsies never get released publicly, but I have seen the reports for 2 of the missing kids you mentioned earlier. Both have the same thing in common. Clean abdominal wounds and missing livers. No struggle marks. No trauma consistent with a fall or impact. Just that one detail. Do I think the monster eats kids? Not exactly. But it hunts them. And it eats certain body parts. Then it leaves the rest. That lines up with what I've seen in the hallways. Not directly. I've never seen that thing in full. I don't know what that thing really looks like. But Benny does. He's not trained for this, and I've never taught him anything special. But he's been with me long enough that he recognizes when that thing is nearby. He hears it before I do. He senses it when it slips between the unfinished walls or moves through the locked service corridors. Every single time that creature gets close to someone, close enough that the kid is about to do something stupid, like take a step into the wrong room, Benny is there first. He puts himself between them and whatever is behind them. Kids think he's part of the game. They see a dog show up in the middle of something spooky, and they assume he's a hint or a guide. They call out to him. They try to follow him deeper into the mall because they think they unlocked a secret stage. There's nothing special about it. Benny goes to them because the monster is very close. Last December, 3 boys snuck in through the service door behind the gym. They were loud, not scared at all. One of them was live streaming it, telling his chat he was about to do Rule 3. I watched them cut across the corridor from the camera feed. I started heading toward him, but Benny was faster. By the time I reached the south wing entrance, Benny was already standing in front of the boys, ears forward, not wagging or excited, just alert. He was looking past them down the hallway. The 3 kids thought it was funny. One bent down and tried to pet him. The kid behind him pulled out his phone and said, "Whoa, is this a bonus round?" I got there just in time to stop them from walking any further. When I turned to look where Benny was facing, I saw something shift in the shadows of the unfinished hallway behind the old vitamin shop. It pulled back the moment Benny growled. Whatever that thing is. I think it's scared of dogs. If he hadn't found him, those boys would have kept going. Another time, this was last spring, a girl was trying to record the elevator part of the game. We were on the elevator with her when she quickly pressed C1 and the door didn't open to the right floor. The hallway she stepped into wasn't part of the mall I knew. It had pipes on the ceiling and a long line of dark concrete rooms with no numbers. She thought it was the secret basement level, so she quickly stepped out with her phone held high. Benny sprinted past me the moment the elevator opened. He shoved himself between her and the hallway, barking hard enough to echo. She froze, and then the lights down that hallway, the ones I didn't know, started shutting off, one after another, each click louder than the last. Something was walking in the darkness, coming toward us. She backed into the elevator, and I slammed the door close button. We didn't talk for the rest of the ride. And that's why I tell people this rule plainly. No metaphors, no jokes. If the dog finds you, the game is over. Follow him out, or you won't leave at all. Kids don't understand how the mall behaves when someone gets too far into the game. They think the flickering lights and the changing hallways are all scripted to scare them. They don't realize the mall is helping it move. They don't notice when it funnels them toward the exact two places they should never go: the South Wing and the unmapped basement levels. The South Wing connects to the back rooms, and the back rooms are where that thing lives. That's where the half-finished hallways are. That's where the sealed fire doors open by themselves. That's where the fire happened years ago. The one they blamed on faulty wiring, even though the workers' bodies were found in positions that didn't match smoke inhalation. People say the expansion stopped because of that. They say the blueprints were shredded on purpose, and nobody talks about it anymore. As for the basement levels, the elevator shouldn't even reach them. But when someone plays the game right, the mall opens paths that aren't supposed to exist. And when someone steps through those paths, that thing follows. And that's why Benny is the last rule. He is the only warning you get. If he finds you, don't film him. Just follow him immediately. More often than not, animals know something we don't. And that's everything. Every rule, every sighting, at least most of them, every kid I had to walk out by the arm, shaking and silent. I've told you what I've seen, and what I've pulled from the logbooks, the broken cameras, and whatever the mall didn't swallow whole. You asked me for the truth, or something close to it. And that's what you got. There isn't more to explain, not really. Some nights I still hear footsteps where there shouldn't be any. Sometimes I catch glimpses on monitors that don't record. Sometimes Benny growls at nothing for a little too long. But that's just the job now. We'll be sticking around, me and Benny. Same uniform, same loop, same elevator that still thinks there's a floor beneath the parking garage. Someone has to keep the kids from pressing the wrong button. I'm not sure what's going to become of this place. Are they going to tear it down? Seems like there might be a chance of that, considering we got you detectives sniffing around the place. But nah, I know the county mayor. He keeps this joint running even if it cost him a few kids. That's how he thinks. Probably tells himself none of this is real and that all the disappearances aren't connected. Benny and I will just have to keep doing our jobs, saving as many as we can. As for you, you've got a badge, You've got a folder full of missing persons reports. You've got enough to file something, push it up the chain, maybe even get a meeting scheduled, who knows? But let's be honest. You've seen the same footage I have. You've read the statements. You know there's no one you can hand this to who will believe any of it. So here's what I'll say. You don't need to believe all of it. You don't need to write it down word for word. But the next time someone brings you a case that leads back to this place, and they will, I want you to remember what I told you. If you ever come back after dark, for whatever reason, bring a flashlight, stay out of the south wing, and don't get on that elevator if it's already open. Hey, huge thank you to all my patrons. If you'd like to support me on Patreon, there's a link in the description. I hope you enjoyed the story, and have a good night. I've been fixing elevators for more than 20 years. Long enough to know that nobody thinks about them until they stop working. That's when the calls come in. Middle of the night, middle of the day, doesn't matter. Someone gets stuck between floors. Doors won't open. Car lurches half a foot past the landing. People think it's boring work, and it's not. You crawl down black shafts where one wrong step can kill you. You lean over live power. Motors big enough to rip your arms off if you're careless. And then there's the people you call out. Drunks, cheaters, panic attacks, once even a dead body. But nothing unexplainable. Not until last month. The call came through dispatch around 10 at night. Old place, the CP Hotel, right off I-90 in Ohio. They didn't say much, just elevator stuck, doors opening when they shouldn't. Vague, but, nothing I hadn't heard before. I loaded my kit into the truck and hit the highway. Rolled past the exit sign for Daggerland and kept on going past. I heard some strange stories about that place. Something that happened there a while back. Something about a guy named Winters, I think, and some dog. Probably made up. You know how urban legends are. Anyway, that's not the story for today. The CP Hotel was easy enough to spot. 14 stories of brick and grime, with a neon sign that buzzed and spat sparks. The P in CP was burned out, so it just glowed C Hotel into the night. Inside, the carpet smelled like mildew and old cigarettes. A chandelier buzzed overhead, one bulb fighting to stay alive. At the front desk sat a man who looked like he'd been there for 50 years. Thin, greasy comb-over plastered across his scalp. Glasses so thick they made his eyes swim behind them. He blinked at me, slow and long, like I'd woken him from a nap. "Yes?" he said. I got a call for a repair," I said, setting my toolbox down. He didn't answer, just raised one shaky finger and pointed down a long, dim hallway. At the far end waited the elevator. Its dented steel doors were tarnished. It looked old. The hallway stretched longer than it looked. My boots sank into carpet that had gone soft with age. The sconces along the walls flickered, throwing shadows that leaned the wrong way. I kept walking, toolbox heavy in my hand, and the hum grew louder, a steady mechanical thrum threaded with little pops and clicks, like something chewing. Up close, the doors were worse. Rust freckles spotted the steel. The seams were black with grease. The call button plate was brass, worn to green at the edges, the up arrow glowing with a weak, pulsing light. I set the toolbox down and pressed the button. The click was sluggish, delayed, like the switch didn't want to admit I'd touched it. Somewhere above, the motor coughed alive. The cables sang faintly in their housing. The doors stuttered open 3 inches, slammed shut again, then groaned wide with a judder that rattled the frame. Inside, the cab waited. Wood paneling cracked and peeling, carpet curling at the corners, 2 fluorescent tubes in the ceiling buzzing like hornets. A fan grill, thick with gray fur, wheezed. I didn't step in yet. First rule, make it talk to you before you climb in. I crouched, ran my flashlight along the sill. Track was packed with grit and gum. Rollers had flat spots worn into them. That explained the stutter. I pressed door close with my knuckle. The panels dragged, coughed, but sealed shut. I pressed door open. Same stutter. I stood listening. The motor hummed a low note through the wall, brake pads squealing faintly. I keyed open the service panel. Dust puffed out, carrying the sour smell of old wiring. Cloth-wrapped harnesses, brittle insulation, contactors spotted with corrosion. No popped fuses, no scorch. I looked it back up, straightened. All right, let's see how you run, I muttered. I stepped into the cab, and the doors slammed shut on their own before I touched a thing. The cab jolted hard enough to knock my teeth together. The indicator needle above the door twitched, hesitated, then began to climb. I hadn't pressed a button. The motor wailed and pulled us higher. At least it works, I thought. The car shuddered to a stop. The brake caught too soft, like it wasn't sure if it wanted to hold, and the doors creaked open. Balloons drifted lazily into the cab, strings brushing my arm. Beyond, a hotel conference room stretched wide. Streamers drooped from thumbtacks, paper faded and torn. A folding table sagged under the weight of a sheet cake. The frosting shone under the light. The words, "Happy Birthday, Tommy," bleeding blue into the white. A circle of children sat waiting in mismatched chairs, paper hats tilted, dresses and shirts rumpled. One girl tilted her head. "Sit," she said. My knees bent on their own. The chair groaned under me. A boy with freckles slowly cut into the cake. The knife squeaked through hardened frosting. He served me a slice on a paper plate. I didn't touch it, but they did. At first, small, neat bites, then bigger, louder. Cake and frosting stuffed into mouths too wide. Wet chewing filled the room. Giggles bubbled up beneath it, light and sweet, but wrong. One boy shoved both hands into his slice and crammed it in, knuckles scraping his teeth. His gums peeled back too far, exposing an extra row of teeth crowding in pale and sharp. A girl bent her head and licked the icing directly off the plate, her tongue long and forked at the end. The giggles turned to cackling, frosting spraying, eyes rolling. Their faces stretched, cheeks ballooning, features slipping into something monstrous. Every head snapped toward me all at once, and I bolted. Toolbox smacked against my leg as I staggered back into the cab. My hands slammed close, 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 until the doors obeyed. The last glimpse I caught was of the cake, sagging, bubbling. The door shut, and the cab jerked upward. My toolbox banged against the rail with a hollow clang. I clutched the bar, breathing hard. Sweat ran down my temples, even though the cab was cool again. "What the hell was that?" I said to myself. I'd seen some weird stuff on this job. Drunks passed out on the floor. Guy who thought an elevator was a good place to shoot up. Even a dead guy once, sitting propped against the wall like he had just fallen asleep. But this? Kids. A whole room of kids waiting for me like I'd been invited to a birthday party. Eating cake until their jaws cracked and their faces slid into something else. That wasn't a glitch. That wasn't bad wiring or a sticky relay. That was... No. I shook my head hard, trying to rattle the thought out. Elevators don't open undo whatever the hell that was. A hotel conference room gone rotten? A memory? A dream? I looked at the control panel. Dead. Every button dark. My reflection in the middle plate looked washed out, eyes too wide. The motor above groaned. The car kept climbing, like it had a destination in mind. I muttered to myself, half out loud, "Don't lose it. Don't lose it. Just figure it out. Find the problem. Fix it. That's the job." But deep down, I knew this wasn't something a wrench or a breaker reset was going to fix. The indicator needle trembled, skipped past numbers, and froze. The brake caught with a greasy squeal, and the doors shuddered open. Heat slammed into me, the kind that steals your breath before you can even curse. It rolled into the cab in waves, carrying the stink of scorched metal and something wetter, like a butcher's shop fire. The floor beyond wasn't hotel carpet. It was an industrial cavern. Steel beams towered overhead, rust running in streaks down their sides. The concrete underfoot gleamed black, slick with something I didn't know. And lining the walls, furnaces. Massive, square-mouthed things big enough to swallow cars. Their doors hung open, spewing fire so bright it burned my eyes. Conveyor belts clanked and screeched their way toward those fires, and on them lay shapes. Human shapes. Piled like trash. The belts dragged them forward, jerking, squealing, until they tipped into the flames, and they screamed. Not together, not in unison, but in a chorus of panicked, cut-short cries, pleading, shrieking, one after another. Figures worked the belts, tall, crooked things, their arms too long, their bodies stooped. Their hands dragged sparks from the metal as they walked. They bent, picked up the slack bodies when the belts jammed, and tossed them into the fire like broken mannequins. I couldn't move. The heat blistered my skin, and I still couldn't move. Then one of them stopped. Slowly. Its head turned toward me. It dropped the body it was holding. The thud echoed across the chamber. And then it started walking. Another stopped, turned, and then walked right toward me. The furnace behind them roared louder, flames leaping out, like it was reaching for me. I staggered back into the cab, toolbox banging against my knee. My hand hammered the close button again and again. One of the things reached the threshold, and one long arm curled around the frame. The door shuddered, groaned, began to push against it. The thing leaned in, and then a sharp break. The arm folded, yanked back, and the door slammed shut. The cab rattled violently, as if something outside had struck it. The motor screamed, and it dragged me upward again. The cab rattled, shivering like it was about to come loose from the cables. I staggered against the wall, breathing ragged, the stink of scorched steel and burned flesh still choking my nose. "I gotta get out," I muttered. I gotta get out of here." I spun on the panel, jabbing every button. Lobby, close, open, 2, 3, 4, anything. Nothing lit. Nothing answered. My thumb jammed the emergency stop so hard it left a dent. Dead. The motor above groaned, dragging me higher anyway. I cursed, yanking open the service panel with shaking hands. Dust puffed out. Wires twisted in brittle bundles. I grabbed a breaker switch and slammed it down. Sparks spit, but the hum kept on. Come on, I said. But the car didn't even hesitate. I thought about the hatch, climbing out, hauling myself onto the roof. But if it moved while I was up there, no, that was a death wish. I gripped the rail again. Every nerve screamed at me to do something. But there was nothing to do. The cab wasn't mine anymore. The indicator needle trembled, stuttered, then froze. The brake screeched, and the doors began to open. For the first time since this nightmare started, I saw something that almost looked normal. An exit sign glowed just across the hall, buzzing faintly. Below it, a plain gray metal door with a crash bar. The little Running Man stencil pointed down towards safety. Relief surged through me. Thank God, I muttered, toolbox swinging at my side as I stumbled out. My legs felt weak, knees threatening to give, but I kept moving. The bar clicked easily under my hand, and the door pushed open with a heavy groan. Stairs. That's what I expected. The sharp echo of concrete steps, the cold smell of a service stairwell. Instead, there was nothing. Blackness stretched beyond the frame. Not the dark of an unlit stairwell. This was thicker. The light from the hallway stopped flat against it, like it hit a wall. I leaned closer, heart hammering, and then I saw them. Eyes. Tiny, burning red points, thousands of them. Pinpricks scattered deep into the dark, so far away they could have been stars. But they weren't stars. They blinked, all at once, and then they started moving. The red pinpricks drew closer. Pairs began to line up, rising higher than my head, lowering close to the ground, weaving through each other like predators in a pack. The sound came next. A low, rolling scrape, like claws dragging across stone, and then breathing. Dozens of lungs sucking air all at once. My whole body locked up. My hand stayed on the crash bar, frozen. The eyes surged forward. And that broke me. I yanked my hand back, slammed the door shut, and bolted. Toolbox banging against my thigh, I sprinted for the elevator like a man running for his life. The cab doors were still open, and I dove inside, hammered the close button with both fists. The last thing I saw through the narrowing gap was the stairwell door bulging outward, rattling on its hinges, the glow of red eyes pressing outward. The door sealed. The cab jolted violently, and the motor above screamed. Upward. The cab rattled like it was coming apart. My lungs felt like they'd shrunk to half size, every breath short and ragged. I clutched the rail, forehead pressed to the cold wood paneling. My whole body shook. I can't do this, I said. I gotta get out. I have to get out. The button stared back at me, lifeless. I slammed my fist against them once, twice, until my knuckles burned, but nothing lit. Nothing answered. I yanked at the service panel again, half crazed. Jiggle breakers, flip switches. Spark snapped, bit my fingers, but the motor above only growled louder, like it was laughing. The indicator needle jittered, skipping numbers. The fan in the ceiling wheezed, then gave a single hiccup. And then the ringing started. At first it was faint, then another, until it wasn't faint at all. Until the sound of ringing telephones filled the air, leaking through the cracks of the door, so loud it set my teeth on edge. The cab shuddered to a stop, and the doors creaked open. The ringing started faint, then swelled into a roar. By the time the cab doors creaked open, it was all I could hear. The hallway stretched forever, and both walls were lined with rotary phones, cords stiff with age. Every 4 feet, another one. Every single receiver trembled on its cradle as it rang. I stepped out, toolbox dangling from my hand, ears buzzing from the sheer noise. The closest one rang sharp and shrill, louder than the rest, and against every instinct, I lifted the receiver. Dogs, a pack of them, snarling, barking, claws skittering against hardwood floors. The sound hit me in the gut, vivid and wrong. I could smell them, could feel the panic of being 10 years old again, trapped in a neighbor's yard. Hot breath snapping at my skin. This isn't real, I muttered, and I slammed the receiver back down. The next one rang louder. My hand moved before I could stop it. Voices, whispering, layered, like 100 conversations happening at once. I caught fragments. Going up. Don't step down 13th. Watch the doors. All tumbling over each other. I dropped the phone, let it swing wild on its cord until it smacked against the wall. Another rang. I snatched it up like it might save me. Yeah, police department. A man's voice. Relief hit me so hard I almost cried. Oh, thank God. Listen, I'm at the CP hotel. The elevator's gone crazy. I don't know what floor I'm on. All right, calm down, sir, the officer said. We'll send someone there right away, okay? Just need your information first. Yeah, anything, yeah. All right, date of birth? Yeah, sure, March 9th, 1984, I said without thinking. Silence. Then the man chuckled. 1984, huh? Very funny, sir. 20 years went by just like that, huh? I frowned. What are you? But the line clicked. Dead air hissed back at me. I pulled the phone from my ear. The cord was cracked, stiff. Dust coated the mouthpiece. The receiver slipped from my fingers. I didn't even hang it up. Another phone rang. I froze. And I knew the voice that answered. Hey. My stomach dropped. It was him. The bully. The kid who'd made my life hell in grade school. The one who'd shoved me out of a second-floor window while I screamed. Left me with a broken leg and a grin on his face. The one who died years later in a car crash. You saw it, didn't you? The furnace, yeah, you did. That's where you're going. My grip went slick. You're not leaving, you little pansy. You'll stay here with me. Hey, I'm coming to visit. I yanked the receiver away and nearly threw it. Every phone in the hall started ringing louder. The sound built into a teeth-rattling roar, bells slamming against metal, cords twitching like snakes. I thought about the elevator, about going back in. But another thought wormed in. Maybe I don't have to. The telephones were unbearable, yes, but at least they weren't flames. At least there weren't monsters here. If I stayed here, then maybe. And then the phone directly in front of me convulsed. The casing cracked down the middle. The rotary dial warped. With a sickening lurch, the whole unit ripped free of the wall and hit the floor with a heavy thud. It grew. Metal warped, cords thickening into veiny cables. The receiver split in half, jaw-like, opening wide. And in seconds, it loomed taller than me. A giant telephone, its open mouth dripping spittle, clacking its teeth together with bone-shaking force. The sound rang through the hall. Sparks flew from its jaws. The thing lurched forward on tangled cords, receiver jaws opening wider, wider. The air quaked with each bite. I screamed and staggered back, toolbox clattering. My eyes darted up and down the hall, searching for a door, a vent, anything. But there was nothing. Just more phones, all of them ringing. The massive jaw lunged. Teeth slammed shut inches from my head. I bolted. The cab still waited open, like it'd known I was running back. I dove inside, hammering the close button again until my thumb went numb. The giant telephone slammed against the doors as they sealed, the chomp reverberating through the cab. Then silence. The car trembled. The motor above screamed, and it began to rise. The cab rattled, groaning like the cables above were grinding through bone. My stomach swooped. The brake caught with a sound like tearing metal. The doors shuddered open. Cold air poured in. Not the recycled chill of air conditioning. This was raw. A winter bite that sank into my skin and scraped my lungs with every breath. I flinched back, then leaned forward again, because what I was seeing couldn't be real. Snow. It drifted down from the ceiling. Flakes spiraled lazily in the yellow glow of the cab light before vanishing into the endless white beyond. The floor stretched into an open, barren expanse of snow, rolling and uneven. No walls, no corners, no end. Just white ground under a high gray ceiling that should have belonged outside. My breath plumed, vapor curling in front of me before fading into the haze. I stepped out. My boots sank into powder with a crunch. Behind me, the elevator hummed, its doors staying open like they were daring me to come crawling back. I turned once, my footprints already blurred, half filled by the falling flakes. A breeze tugged at my sleeves. It was there, cold, damp, carrying scents I hadn't smelled in decades. And then, "Come out." My chest seized. My heart thudded so hard I could feel it in my teeth. It was him. The bully. Not just any kid, the kid. The one who turned my childhood into a gauntlet. The one who'd cornered me behind the school dumpsters, shoved my face into the dirt until I couldn't breathe, laughed when I was crying. The one who once pushed me out of that second-story window just to watch my leg snap like a twig. He was dead. I knew he was dead. A car crash took him years ago. I'd seen the memorial flowers tied to a telephone pole. But his voice was alive here, The exact tone he'd used when I was hiding and he was circling closer. I dropped low into the snow, pressing myself against a drift. My breath fogged the air. Crunch. Footsteps. He emerged from the haze. Taller now. Older. But unmistakable. His shoulders were broader, his face harder. But the grin was the same. An axe swung loose in his hand, blade dulled and notched, but heavy enough to split me in two. He trudged across the snow with the slow, easy rhythm of someone who knows he's already won. He whistled.
Where are you?
I hated that song. Same damn whistle he used when he stalked me after school. Back when I was small enough to fit in lockers, and gullible enough to think hiding behind a teacher's car would save me. The sound slithered through the snowfall, off key. I clenched my jaw. He dragged the axe behind him, carving a line through the snow. Boots sank deep, leaving craters that filled slowly as flakes piled in. He paused, tilted his head, listening.
I can hear you.
I froze so hard my knees screamed. I crawled forward, each movement deliberate. My eyes darted across the white emptiness, desperate. There's gotta be a way out. But there wasn't. No doors, no walls, not even exit signs or stairwells. Just the endless white, and the bully stalking it with his axe and his whistle. Then I saw it, half buried under snow, 30 feet ahead. A square iron hatch, rusted and warped, set flush into the ground. A bent handle jutted from it. I crept faster, boots crunching, breath ragged in my ears.
Hey, there you are.
My blood froze. I whipped around. He was closer than I'd realized. The axe was already rising, snow sprang off the blade. He looked down at me.
Hey, don't worry, okay? It'll be quick. You remember when I pushed you from that window?
Quick, right?
Well, it'll be like that, except with an axe. Hey, you're gonna like it here.
I lunged, slipping, clawing at the hatch handle. My glove stuck to the frozen metal, but it shrieked open. I dove headfirst into the dark just as the axe came down. Metal clanged. Sparks spit across the snow as the blade bit the rim of the hatch. And then I was gone. The chute swallowed me whole. I slid fast, shoulders slamming into dented steel, sparks flaring where the toolbox scraped ahead of me. The walls were slick with something. Frost, grease, I couldn't tell, and my arms pinwheeled helplessly. It twisted. Sharp turns, impossible angles, as though the chute was folding in on itself. My stomach lurched, my throat locked in a silent scream. Snow clung to me, melting icy trails down my back. My breath whipped past me, sucked away into the dark. I seemed to fall forever, and then I hit something soft. I sank into mountains of fabric, yellowed sheets, scratchy wool blankets, uniforms so old their patches had peeled. I scrambled to my knees. Dust erupted around me in gray clouds. My flashlight shook in my trembling hand, beam slicing through the haze. The basement stretched wide and low. Ceiling pipes dripped rust. Every inch of space was filled with sagging piles of linen. I spun in circles, beam cutting across shadows. My heart jackhammered. I expected to see a monster lunge out or a pair of red eyes blink open in the dark. But there was nothing. No movement. No sound but the slow settling of cloth and the rasp of my own breath. The quiet was worse. I forced myself upright, boots crunching through fabric that should have been soft but broke like paper. Each step sank, left prints that filled back in as the pile slumped, like the linen wanted to bury me alive. I pushed forward, toolbox bumping my thigh, eyes darting for escape. And then I saw it. A door. Half buried under a collapsed heap of blankets, its outline just visible. I clawed my way through the mound, sending dust spiraling. My hand found the knob, tarnished brass, cold, but solid. I twisted. The latch clicked.